All right, so we are recording, so I will go ahead and call this work session to order. And the purpose of the work session today is to discuss the draft 2021-2026 Gilliam County Strategic Plan. And so I kind of, Commissioners, I thought what I might do is just start with sort of an overview of the feedback that we received from the community in the community survey. First, I have a little slide deck that we can run through, and then I thought we could dive into the actual document. Does that work for you guys?
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Okay. Give me 1 second, and I will make sure I can share this. Let's see here. Share screen. Let's try this. Okay. We'll see if it'll let me do it. There we go. All right. So I just wanted to run through, mostly for the public, just sort of the milestones that we've reached in the strategic planning process. So back in early August, we approved this approach, which was really meant to be able to keep us on track with getting the strategic plan in place while recognizing that we couldn't do the community town halls and things like that we probably would have preferred to do. So between the 6th of August and the 21st, the county court members received and provided feedback on a SWOT analysis. So basically identifying the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for the county. And then that feedback was used to draft employee and community surveys, which were released in early September. Then we heard back from the community around the 21st of September. We had 27 employee survey responses come back, so a little more than half, and 140 community survey responses, which, given that it was mostly online, I thought was a pretty good response. And so between the 21st and today, I took those survey responses and drafted an initial strategic plan just so we had something to work from and look at. That draft, which we'll talk about later in the work session, has been shared with all of the employees and with the elected officials for their feedback. And so all of their comments and suggestions have already been worked into the document that's before us today. So I'll just dig into the data. The first question that we asked the public had to do with just their perception in terms of their interaction with their county government. And on the whole, I was really optimistic about their responses. So the blue lines on here represent responses that were agree or somewhat agree. The yellow are neither disagree or agree, so sort of a neutral, and then the little green lines are disagree or somewhat disagree. And so I just wanted to sort of draw your attention in particular to the three at the bottom that have to do with our staff and interactions with our staff. 71% of the respondents said that when they contact a Gilliam County office or department, they receive the information that they need. 77% said that Gilliam County personnel treat them with respect. And 71% said that Gilliam County personnel are knowledgeable and professional. So I've already shared these statistics with our folks and just gave them a big kudos. That's fantastic when roughly 3/4 of the population is saying that their local government is professional, knowledgeable, gives them the information they need, and treats them with respect. I think that's really indicative of the great people we have working here. So I just wanted to sort of flag that and let you know that that although not everyone is always happy with their local government, I think our communities seem to be pretty happy with the performance of our personnel. So any questions on this one?
If you add in the neither agree or disagree, which are people that maybe just have no opinion on it, it's really high.
Exactly. Yeah, there's very few who don't think that our personnel are on the right track. So that was fantastic. The one that I did want to note that you notice is a little bit lower is Gilliam County is responsive to my community's needs. 57% of people said agreed or somewhat agreed with that. The neither disagree or agree was at 16%, and then 27% for the lower part. So that may be something that as we dig further in, we can kind of look at ways to better connect with what those communities are feeling we're missing. That makes sense.
Yes.
So question 2, consider the following statements regarding Gilliam County government finances and select the response that best represents your views for each one. Again, pretty good feedback on most of these. So the one at the top is interesting. Gilliam County spends public funds wisely. 31% disagreed with that, actually. And 21% were in that yellow category, the neither agree or disagree. And then 47% were either agree or somewhat agree. So that's maybe something that we need to look at further since we haven't sort of crossed even the halfway point on spending funds wisely. So it might be interesting to try to dig into that. What's interesting though is if you look at the next question, which is I receive good value from Gilliam County for my local tax dollars, 57% of people agreed with that. So it's interesting, there's a perception that the funds aren't being spent wisely, but that they're still good value for what they're paying for their taxes. So on that one in particular, 30% disagreed or somewhat disagreed. 12% was neither agree nor disagree, and then 57% was somewhat agree or agree. Same with the next one, which is interesting. Gilliam County invests in programs and services that benefit me and my community. 52% of respondents agreed with that. 19% were in the neither disagree or agree, and then 29% were in the disagree or somewhat disagree category. So it seems in all of these questions, we have roughly about 30% of the population that are in the disagree or somewhat disagree category. Same for Gilliam County does a good job of saving and planning for the future. That was 29% disagree or somewhat disagree. 46% were agree or somewhat agree. So I think of the two, definitely spending funds wisely, planning for the future, those were sort of the I think areas in particular that we may need to focus on. And some of that may be an education piece. Some of that may be people don't feel like they have enough information about long-term plans. Because you notice on the good job of saving and planning for the future, that had quite a bit higher of neither agree or disagree. And that may be reflecting people who feel like they don't have enough information really to say one way or the other. So any questions on that one?
I do not.
Or thoughts, comments? All right, number 3. This one is trying to get at our partnerships and how we're doing in terms of our interacting with our local folks and then our neighboring counties. So again, I think fairly good feedback here. One of the things that I think is interesting is you'll see in the next two slides, there's pretty high percentages of sort of average. So in this question, people could select poor, below average, average, above average, or excellent. And so I grouped excellent and above average together. Those are the blue lines. Yellow is average, and then green is poor, below average. So with our cities, 17% rated us poor or below average in our interactions with the cities. 39% said we were average, and then 43% said we were above average or excellent. So for school districts, those numbers were 20% at poor or below average, 42% were average, and then 39% were above average or excellent. For the health districts, 13% were poor or below, 47% were average, and 39% were above or excellent. For the other local taxing districts, 14% said poor or below, 52% said average, and 44% said above average or excellent. I'm sorry, 34% said above average or excellent. And then for our community, our chambers of commerce and our business community, 16% said that we were poor or below, 34% said average, and 49% said above average or excellent. And of all of the categories, this was the one that scored the highest in terms of above average and excellent. And so I don't know if that in part has to do with the partnership that we've had with the chambers for the COVID relief stuff, if that's sort of front end of mind for a lot of people. And so maybe that might have triggered more positive responses because that was a more recent example of a partnership that folks would be well aware of. So that could be sort of reflected in there. For our neighboring counties, 17% said we were poor or below average, 43% said average, and then 40% said above average or excellent. And then for the Eastern Oregon counties more broadly, the wider region, 18% said that we were poor or below average, 49% said we were average, and 33% said we were above or excellent. And one thing I just want to point out on these is you'll see there's a huge, obviously the yellow sort of dominates in here. One of the things that if we were to do this over again that we would probably include is a don't know option. We did not include that in here, and I think what may be happening with some of these numbers is that people may not be aware of what or feel like they're in a position to really comment, and so we may have some folks who have chose average as the safe spot to not give positive or negative feedback because they were unaware of what the relationship actually is or the partnership. So that's just something to sort of flag. I noticed there's a lot of average in those, and that may be part of what's driving that higher average number, as well as people who would have otherwise just said, I don't know. So this is similar question, just talking about the effectiveness of our advocacy for local needs with our state and federal partners. And we have several state partners on this call, so this is interesting information, I think, to be able to share. So again, people were asked to rate how our advocacy is with either poor, below average, average, above average, or excellent. For the state legislature, 38% said that we were poor or below average, 45% said average, and 18% said above average or excellent. For state agencies, 35% said that we were poor or below average, 44% said average, and 22% said above average or excellent. For the governor, 45% said that we were poor or below average, 37% said average, and 18% said above average or excellent. For our congressional representatives, 36% said below average or poor or below average, 44% said average, and then 20% said above average or excellent. And then finally, with the federal agencies, 36% said poor or below average, 47% said average, and then 17% said above average or excellent. So again, note in most of these, the yellow really dominates. And I think that's probably people who maybe are unfamiliar with what our relationship might be with those entities. And so rather than skewing the numbers either negative or positive, they just opted for the middle ground. I will note, obviously, to me, the number that sticks out in terms of the negative side of things is definitely the relationship with the governor. And that may be several things. That may be a reflection of people being unhappy with what the governor's doing and feeling like she's not taking into account Eastern Oregon's or Gilliam County's needs. So it could be a number of things that's sort of skewing that. It may be that people are upset with her in particular and what she's doing, and so therefore that's bleeding over into people's feedback about our interactions with her. Any questions or thoughts on this slide?
Well, we either need to be more transparent on our interactions with these agencies, or informing the public a little more of what we do to interact with these agencies.
Yeah, I agree. Because we definitely, I mean, our office, as we all know, is regularly in touch with NATE STICE and state agencies, you know, on a daily basis. So, but that's not something we really widely talk about just because it doesn't, you know, we talk about it when it comes up. It's not something that we are proactively mentioning. So that's definitely something I think we could talk about some more, is how those partnerships actually work. And frankly, part of it too, I think, is just getting our feet underneath us in terms of how we interact with the legislature and our congressional representatives in particular. That, you know, we're still a fairly new court, and those first couple of years sometimes are just getting a lay of the land before you can really be effective as an advocate. So, but that's definitely something that I took away as an area that we can really work to improve, not just how we communicate about what we're doing, but also put more focus and time in those partnerships.
Sounds good.
Okay, so number 5, we asked a question about the north-south divide. And so no surprises here. We just asked folks just straight out, do you believe there's a north-south divide? 74.8% of respondents said yes. So 14%, a little over 14%, almost 15% said no. 9% were unsure, and 1.3% didn't respond to the question. That's the little purple sliver there. So definitely a north-south, or at least a perception of a north-south divide amongst our respondents. I just thought it was helpful to kind of capture that, and that may be something in years to come that we can measure and see if that changes over time. So question number 6 sort of dives into the north-south divide and gives us some potential things that we might do to sort of bridge that gap. What we did is we gave folks 5 different strategies and had them ranked from 1 to 5, 5 being the most important strategy and 1 being the least important. And so what I did in these for this slide is I just showed the number of people that ranked each of these most important, second most important, and third most important to kind of help assess out what the top 3, you know, the 3 that got the most people saying that these were one of the top 3 priorities. So, so the 3 that sort of rose to the top, and you'll see this reflected in the strategic plan, were to host regular roundtable discussions with the North and South taxing districts and stakeholders, to provide greater access to Gilliam County elected officials in both communities, and then to use Gilliam County funding to encourage the North and South ends to work together. So something we may look at, for instance, in our grant programs is perhaps giving extra points if it's a countywide project or a countywide collaboration, for instance. So if we've got a North and South district that are working together, maybe they have a higher funding priority than if it's one community going it alone. So that may be an example of something that we could do or look at to doing to help try to encourage more collaboration. The other thing that I thought was interesting is on the combine the North and South taxing districts. As you'll see, quite a few people ranked that as their #1 priority. But what's interesting is quite a few, almost the same amount of people that ranked it as #1 also ranked it as least important. So it's definitely polarizing. People had strong opinions on whether those taxing districts should be continue to be a North and South split or whether they should be county-wide. And so from a court perspective, those districts are really, it's really up to them on whether they want to combine or not. And that's why I didn't really put it in the strategic plan, because it's really those board decisions need to happen on whether they want to combine long-term or not. But I did find it interesting that quite a few people thought it might be the best solution to the North-South divide, but there was an equal number of people who thought it was the worst idea of the 5. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I don't know if I didn't look at the crosstabs to see if it matters if North and South, if that's actually the part of the divide is North and South on whether to combine districts or not. I didn't look by zip code to see where the people who thought it would be the most effective, where they live. It wouldn't surprise me entirely if a lot of those folks are from the South End, who are looking at, sharing resources more, and the North End maybe a little less willing to do so. Questions or comments on this one?
Okay, so I was having a little trouble with the color coding on this one. Like on the first one, the green is the part. Explain it to me again, please.
So the green is that represents the number of people who said that would be the most effective way to address the North-South divide. So the longer green ones are the ones that people thought that would be the most effective. So what I did, because as you see, like on the combined North and South, it has a lot of people who felt really strongly that it was #1, but then it sort of tapers off pretty dramatically on 2 and 3 and 4 kind of thing. And then a lot of people thought it was the worst idea of the 5. So what I tried to do was just capture how many people, if we were looking at the whole numbers, which 3 got the top sort of total combined top 3 strategies, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments on this one?
Well, it just giving me a lot to think about. As everyone I think knows, I am very opposed to the North and South divide, and that we're just one county. So I think we need to give this a lot of thought and figure out how we can try to dissolve that.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Yeah, I think it was really helpful to see that a sort of universal perception that it's there, that it's not just a few people who see it. I thought that was helpful data to have.
Yeah.
For question number 7, we just threw this out because occasionally we get folks who say to us, well, one community got this, so the other community should get X, Y, and Z kind of thing. And so we just wanted to kind of get a read from the community in terms of how they feel we should treat them. So whether the approach should be that everybody just gets the same, or that we look at individual needs and try to meet those. And so not surprisingly, I think 86%, almost 87% of the respondents said that our support for each of the communities needs to be based on the individual need of the community. Let me see. 4% said that it should be based on one size fits all, and 7.6% were unsure. And then there was 1.3% that didn't respond. So for me, that was just a useful data point in terms of, I think we have approached it previously on looking at each community's individual needs and trying to address those as they come up, rather than say, well, if Arlington gets this, Condon has to get, you know, the same amount of money kind of thing. And the public seems to support that approach of really catering to each community's need. Questions or comments on that one? Nothing there? Okay. And then this is the last slide. So consider the following priorities for economic and community development in Gilliam County. Rank them with 1 being the most important priority, 7 being the least. So again, this is similar. Those green ones are the ones that people picked as their #1 priority. Yellow is the ones that they picked as their #2, and then blue as their #3. And so I just, rather than do all 7, which kind of made it hard to look at, I just did the top 3 so that we could sort of see how they stacked up. So the top, I would say 4 that sort of rose to the top, 3 of which are in the strategic plan, and the 4th we can talk about whether we want to have in there or not. The #1 thing was housing, not a surprise there. Addressing the housing shortage to enable existing jobs to be filled by residents. That had strong first, second, and third priority numbers. High-speed internet access came in as #2 to enable people to work from home. Again, I don't think any surprises there. Recruiting new large or mid-sized employers to Gilliam County, and then also closely followed by improving the livability of local communities by increasing amenities and services. I think those 4 definitely rose to the top. And if you'll see in the strategic plan that I included the livability as an economic development priority and sort of phrased it as working with those cities, school districts, and taxing districts to address livability issues. And so you'll see when we get into there, that was designed to sort of capture both the partnership data that we were getting back, as well as this sort of being identified as a priority. And so the 3 that came in at the very bottom were supporting new businesses and entrepreneurs, new small businesses and entrepreneurs, developing local recreational opportunities, and promoting tourism were all ranked much lower. So questions about this one?
No surprise. We all know those are our biggest issues. So.
Yeah, for me, it was just a good reinforcement that we were on the right track on those. That we were getting the community's priorities.
Yeah, we just need some solutions.
Yeah. Now that we know what the problem is, we just need to address those.
Well, the problem, the solution.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen here, and let me just get out of here really quick. The next thing I'm wondering is, I think what I will do is bring up the actual strategic plan, the draft, so we can talk about that. Just give me 1 second. Let's share this one. Okay, so this was sort of my initial take on what we saw in the survey data. And my goal for this, I sort of want to tee this up for both the public and for you guys so that you kind of know where I was coming from on this. I really think it's important that we have a strategic plan that is accessible to the public. And by that I mean not so wordy and lengthy that people will never read it, right, and never, you know, and it's hard to hold us accountable if people aren't reading it, those kinds of things. And so what I wanted really ideally was to have something that could actually be put on, you know, like a pamphlet that could be mailed out to everybody to say, this is what we're doing, and here's the progress that we're making, basically. And so that is why it's not wordy. It doesn't necessarily really talk about the actual solution in terms of here's our housing plan or here's our fiber plan. It's just mostly surfacing, here are our big picture goals and here are strategies that we are going to be pursuing to help bring those to fruition. The other thing that we may have people wondering about is the strategic plan doesn't talk about things like education, healthcare, things that the previous strategic plan would have or did include. And again, this is by design. One of the things I think is really important for anybody that's setting goals is to make sure that you actually have authority and accountability over what you're setting goals over. So because we're not the school board, so we don't set education policy and we don't set the direction of the school. Education isn't in here because we don't have control over that. And neither do we have control over our health districts and what they decide they're going to do. And so this is really about trying to keep the county in our lane and focus on the things where we can actually make some progress and sort of move the needle on things that the community has identified. Now, that does not mean that if the school districts have strategic plans that we can't be a partner in helping them reach their goals that they've established. But it just means that for our own strategic plan, that the focus is really on things that we have control over and can actually do something about, if that makes sense.
Yes, totally. Yeah. And I like the simplicity of it because in a 5-year range, our situations could change. I mean, COVID-19 has made our lives change for in the last year. So this is more adaptable in a simpler form to what our lives are really and how our county's growing.
Yeah.
I like it too.
Ahead,
It's so focused. When you have too many goals, we're going to have the chance to, I think, to be a lot more successful if we narrow down on, some of the things that are in our lane. So yeah, I think it's good. It looks, when we saw that brochure from, was it Umatilla County?
Mm-hmm.
County. I mean, I think we're on the same page. I think everybody thought that was great and the way to go because, like you said, you put this thing, if it's 100 pages long,
nobody cares.
Yeah, it gets on the shelf and who's going to look,
Yeah, and my intention would be once we have a strategic plan that we all feel comfortable with, that we would probably put together our own brochure similar to what Umatilla County did and distribute that to everyone in the county. And then each year, about this time, we can do a strategic plan review where we just sort of go through these goals and strategies one by one and kind of check in and see where we are and make sort of a plan for what's the next step for the upcoming year kind of thing, and then maybe do a follow-up brochure that sort of updates the public each year on here's what we've accomplished in the current year, here's what we're planning for the upcoming year, so that people can track and hopefully with some of these we reach those goals and we can take it off the strategic plan and put something new on. You know, the idea is that this isn't it's a living document, I think, to Sherry's point about having some flexibility. So with that, I can just walk through sort of the goals and strategies, and then maybe we'll just do goals and then the strategies and talk about each one individually. And then if you guys have any edits or things you want to add, cut, any of those things, we can make those on my screen as we go. So the first goal is to foster an organizational culture where people want to work and do business. And this is really about focusing not just on our employees, sort of the environment that they're working in and how they feel about the courthouse, but also how people feel about doing business with us. So the public coming into our offices. Again, the public has told us that they, by and large, have had positive experiences with our personnel. And so the goals are more focused on the organizational culture for our employees at this point, because I think that's an area where we have some work to do. So in the employee survey, which I did not put slides together for that, but the sort of top two things that the employees told us were areas that needed to have focus from the county court were having to do with having consistent internal policies and procedures that were applied consistently, and then also communicating those expectations to employees in a consistent way. So that's where the first strategy comes into play, is maintain the internal policies and procedures that reflect best practices, develop a plan to support consistent two-way communication about those expectations. So we're already doing quite a bit of work on policies and procedures anyway, and so the intent would be that that work continues, and that in concert with that, that we're developing training and communication plans to make sure that employees know what those policies and procedures mean, they know who to ask, go to if they have questions, all of those kinds of things. Number two, under that goal, is to invest in the professional development of current and aspiring leaders. And then number three is look for ways to get to yes. And I did have some questions that came up from our employees and elected officials when they read that, and so it might sort of help to elaborate on that. It's just the idea that within the culture that we foster a culture of creative problem solvers. So whether it's an internal employee request or challenge, or whether it's a member of the public coming to one of our offices with a unique challenge, that rather than being always black and white and saying this doesn't allow for that, that we try to, whenever possible, be creative and look for a path to yes, if it makes sense. Doesn't always mean we'll get to yes, and it doesn't always mean that yes is going to satisfy the employee or the member of the public. But it's just that idea that we are not so rigid in our thinking that we overlook possible solutions to problems. So any comments or edits or suggestions to either the goal or the strategy underneath there?
Go ahead. You want me to go?
Yes.
Go first.
I think that it's pretty common that having the to communicate our expectations and to have consistent internal policies. I think that's pretty common for employees in all workplaces to, you know, feel that. And I really like number two. You know, I think that's going to be excellent to try to encourage that as well. So I think it looks good.
Consistency, important in the workplace between departments. Very important.
Okay, so any edits or suggestions you guys want to make to any of those, or do those look good?
I don't have any.
I think it looks good.
Okay, so for number 2, the goal is to promote growth and prosperity throughout all of Gilliam County. And again, the strategies are coming primarily from the data we received, or the feedback we received from the community. Number 1 is work with internet service providers, local, state, and federal partners, and other stakeholders to expand affordable, reliable, high-speed internet access to every residence and business in Gilliam County. So this idea being that we've got some pretty good trunks now and pretty good service within the cities, but we still, as we know from COVID, have a huge digital divide with our folks living outside of city limits.
Yes.
So this just sets a goal, and it's a pretty ambitious one, is that everybody should have access within the county, period, regardless of where you live.
Right.
And then number 2 is invest in proactive, creative solutions to the housing shortage. So again, not necessarily deciding upfront what those solutions are going to look like. And part of the investment at PCDC is already sort of getting us partway there. But, you know, if the cities are coming up with interesting housing solutions, those kinds of things, finding ways to be able to partner and support people who are coming forward with some creative ideas to just get housing taken care of. The third one being to serve in a supportive, resourceful role to cities, schools, other taxing districts, and local organizations to help improve livability and address barriers to growth in our communities. Again, this is sort of tying in the two, both the partnerships data piece that we got that said we could maybe do a little bit better job working with our local entities, as well as addressing the livability issues that that the public raised as sort of their 4th priority out of that list of 7. So any thoughts, edits, suggestions on the goal or the strategy there?
Well, I think number 3 comes from 1 and 2. It derives its life from getting the internet accessibility and getting the housing issue resolved. And then that supports all of those things. So,
yeah.
So
yeah, I agree.
Come up with a housing solution. Come on, people.
Exactly. Well, and the other thing too is, you know, the one that I did not put on here that we could talk about whether we wanted to is recruiting the large and mid-sized businesses. But I kind of felt like at this point, until we have a place for employees to actually live, it's going to be really difficult to entice an employer in, because we can't support, we don't have the workforce and the infrastructure to support the workforce for another large employer to come in. I mean, we're, at least at this point, we're not even fully supporting Waste Management's needs in terms of housing within the county. So I kind of felt like we needed to catch up on some of these other things. And so this might be one of those things where, as we look over time, once we address housing and fiber, that then, as those move off of our sort of focus, that we can then really focus in on bringing the larger and mid-sized employers in.
I was just thinking that same thing. Maybe that gets added on the 1st year review, the 2nd year review, later down the line. And I also wanted to say that I'm sorry, my dogs are barking. That I like the fact that we are just going to flat out set an annual review on this, because I think that, you know, a lot of times the strategic plans, besides the fact they're so cumbersome, those the only time it gets reviewed is that, oh, our strategic plan is almost expired. So, you know, it sits on the shelf for 5 years and there's no communication about it anymore. The fact that we're going to say, we're going to look at this every year, it holds us a little more accountable to, you know, trying to achieve some of these goals. And I think you nailed it on this one. I think this is, I mean, it hits our top 3: internet, housing, livability. So I think that's a great place to start.
Yep. Makes our county better all the way around if we can make that happen.
Yeah, if we can hit those 3, we've done a good job here.
Yeah.
Okay, so no changes or edits to that one.
Don't have any.
Okay. Next one gets into the financial sort of side of things a little bit. The goal is to manage the budget to ensure consistent, sustainable programs and services. Again, this is sort of getting to this idea that, you know, the public gave us some feedback that we could do a better job of long-term planning and communicating sort of the value of expenditures to the public. And so the strategies, number 1 is to evaluate county programs and pursue opportunities to optimize the efficiency and effectiveness of services and operations. That's something we currently do to an extent, but I think we can really sort of beef that up more. And number 2 is to maintain healthy cash reserves to capitalize on opportunities and protect essential programs and services. Again, this is with an eye to the SIPs eventually sunsetting and our financial picture changing over time. So really being smart about putting some money away for a rainy day for when that occurs. And then the third being working with elected officials and department heads to seek new funding and create diversified revenue sources. So again, these are mostly just looking at, you know, are there efficiencies that we can find? Are there new revenue sources that we can bring in? And then just being smart about having a healthy cash reserve so that we don't find ourselves in a situation where we have to cut or diminish the services we're able to provide the public. Thoughts, questions, discussion about this one?
Communication on what's happening with these is something that can go into our newsletter to help people understand how we are. I mean, because it's not something we actually publicize and put out there in a, you know, we need to communicate what is happening with these programs and strategies.
Agreed.
We understand where the money's going and what we're doing with it and how we're saving it.
I really like the diversified revenue streams. I've been thinking about that a lot as I've been preparing for different speaking engagements I've had recently. So yeah, that's always one that I've been very interested in developing. So I think this is really good.
Okay. Any edits to this? Sherry, on the communication piece, is that something that you'd like me to try to capture in the language, or is that just a general statement and sort of marching orders for Lisa and I?
Marching order giver. Yeah, no, I don't think it needs to be in there. I just think it's something we need to be aware of, that, you know, the communication of what is happening and how our funds are being used will help people understand. We'll have less of those people in the average or I don't know column, because we have informed them and they do know. And then if they have questions, then from what's being publicized, then they, you know, hopefully they'll ask those questions. Yeah, put something in here about what my phone number is, because I hear people talking about, well, nothing's being done. Well, nobody's talked to me. So
yeah,
that's my rant for today.
So public that's listening, call Commissioner Wilkins. Give her a call. Let her know how we're doing.
Right.
So, so if there's, No edits on that one. The next goal, this one is to really get at that north-south divide question and data that we got back. So the goal would be encourage collaboration, cooperation, and communication between each of the communities that are part of Gilliam County. And the 3 strategies were to host annual roundtable discussions between cities, schools, other taxing districts, and local organizations to share ideas, identify common goals, and foster collaboration between communities. Number 2 is to leverage county funds to encourage public entities and organizations from different communities to work together. And then number 3 is to improve accessibility to Gilliam County personnel and services for all citizens through increased outreach efforts. So again, and I should say, part of this as well, once we sort of set our strategic plan, I know one of the things that Lisa's going to be working on with staff under the county courts umbrella is to really have them looking from their department perspective on how they can help support these things. So like, for instance, improve accessibility to all Gilliam County personnel and services. That may be something that she's asking each of the department heads, what more can we be doing to make sure that we have a presence in all of the communities that we're, so kind of having the staff get engaged and be creative to think about how they can support that overall reaching goal, if that makes sense.
It does. It kind of ties back to number 1, encouraging the creative problem solvers and getting to the yes.
Exactly. So questions, comments, edits for this goal and the strategies. Again, the strategies came almost verbatim out of the data from the community in terms of what they wanted us to prioritize.
Yeah, the roundtable discussions coming from last night's candidate forum, and this city of Arlington, they're concerned about the housing as we are. I know the city of Condon is, and the school districts, we need to sit down as soon as we can and start collaborating in the Chamber of Commerce and come up with some solutions. Stop talking and do something.
I agree with Sherry. That was a big topic last night, and I think there was general agreement among everyone that needs to happen.
We need to collaborate.
Yeah, and that annual roundtable discussions, I think, actually came out of a previous candidates forum. I think it was Frank Betancourt or somebody had thrown out an idea of trying to do something like this, and so I think it's an idea whose time has come, really.
Now it's in the plan. It's in the plan.
It's in the plan. Yeah, exactly. And so any edits or things you guys want to change on those ones?
I do not.
I don't have any.
Okay. So last one is to be a strong voice for Gilliam County in Salem and Washington, D.C. Again, this diving into the data that the public really perceives a lot of our relationships with our state and local partners as average or below average. And so an area we can work on. The strategies, number 1 is to take an active role in organizations such as Association of Oregon Counties and National Association of Counties to foster relationships and amplify our influence with state and federal decision makers. 2 is to partner intentionally and collaboratively with neighboring counties to address common needs and advocate for regional concerns. Again, this getting to the idea that we could use some improvement in interacting with our other Eastern Oregon counties. And then number 3 would be host annual in-county outreach meetings with state and federal lawmakers. I thought this might be a way to not only improve those relationships, which the public has identified as maybe needing some work, but also the fact that we're having them in county, I think will help raise awareness in the public about having those lawmakers in town, and also give our local organizations an opportunity of more face-to-face time with decision makers to be able to advocate, to get back to, you know, our strategy to be supportive and resourceful to cities and schools and other taxing districts, that by bringing those decision makers into Gilliam County more frequently, that can also sort of serve two purposes in terms of being resourceful and also to help develop those relationships.
I think the in-county is key.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Sometimes we only see them during an election year, and the rest of the time they forget that we're here.
Exactly.
We need to remind them.
Yeah. So any thoughts on this one? Anything I missed the mark on, or edits, things that we may want to add?
I don't have anything. I just miss the interaction with the Association of Counties and our you know, getting to go to the different meetings, and we blame everything on COVID, but it has kind of stifled our communications.
It has.
It has. I'm disappointed that we're not going to be able to hold the AOC conference in person.
Yeah, me too. So any edits or changes we want to make to this one? Are we okay with that?
I'm good.
I think it looks great.
Okay. So in terms of next steps, what I'll plan on doing is putting this on the agenda for November 18th, which will be our next regular meeting. That will give the public about a month to weigh in. And so what we may look at doing is just posting this in different places and maybe even putting some notices in the paper to let folks know that the draft strategic plan is up and we're still looking for feedback on it, in case people missed that we were having the work session today. So I'll have Teresa and Lisa work on some strategies just to make sure that the public is aware that there's a draft under consideration now, and to sort of do a last call for input before we make a final decision on adopting it. And then once we have a final draft adopted, again, the plan is to try to package it in a way that can be sort of mailed out or, you know, easily disseminated to members of the public. And then with the idea that every year around this time that we're doing a work session to go through these goals and strategies and identifying next steps and just seeing where we are. So any other questions or things for the good of the order for this particular topic?
I do not.
Okay.
I do not either, but yeah, you did a great job on this.
Thank you.
You and the team.
The team did a fantastic job getting all of this together and really good feedback. The employees reviewed this ahead of time and gave some really good feedback on what, you know, things that they were unclear about and things like that. So it was a good team effort. So with that, I will go ahead and adjourn the work session. It is 10:02, and I will go ahead and call the meeting to order. So this is a regular meeting of the Gilliam County Court. I see Commissioner Weatherall and Commissioner Wilkins are all on Zoom, so we have a quorum. And we'll go into 2.0, which is additions and revisions to the agenda. Does anybody have any edits?
I did not.
Okay. 3.0 is correspondence and public comment. Individuals wishing to address the county court may do so at this time and at other times throughout the meeting. Speakers are asked to be recognized by the chair, give your name and address, and limit comments to 3 minutes. For those who are dialing in via phone, you just need to hit *6 to unmute yourself. That's *6. And then for folks who are dialing in or joining us via Zoom, your little mute button is on the lower left-hand corner of the screen. Any public comments? The other thing that I always tell people as well, if you're new here, is that we're pretty informal. So if you want to jump in when we're on a topic, you are welcome to do so. Let me go on to the next thing, which is correspondence. We have a couple of items in here, and all of these, for folks listening at home, all of these are included on the county's website under our agendas and our court packets. The first is from the assessor, basically certifying the Gilliam County Homestead Rebate Program, how much money went out, all of those kinds of things. So that will be, again, part of the record and in the court packet if anybody wants to look at how the rebate has changed over the years. The second is a letter dated October 6th from Tom Cutsforth. This is regarding a downed tree that is near Mayville, and wanting the county to remove it or to assist in removing it. So I wanted to flag that. It's really, unless it's on county right-of-way, not really something that we do. We don't have a tree removal service. So that may be something that we need neighbors to come together and help get it cleared. But I don't know if the commissioners, if either of you have any thoughts or comments on that.
I did ask Dewey about it, our roadmaster, because I was, curious. And he just said that, it could possibly cause us a problem if the creek floods. He said it would take a day to move the excavator and pile the trees out of the creek.
Okay. Is that something that he thought they were willing to do? Or I see he's on here as well, but.
We could Dewey, are you there?
Can you hear me, Liz?
Yep, we can hear you.
I went out yesterday and looked at it. There's several trees. There's actually 3 trees that the wind knocked a big tree down, and it took 2 other trees out. They are in the creek. It's going to take a big machine to move the one tree. It's a 6-foot through poplar, and it's about 300 feet or so to where the creek crosses the county road. So if we do get high water, it's all going to move down the stream and potentially cause us a problem later on.
Okay. So are you thinking that that is something that the county would be willing to remove just to prevent any problems?
That would prevent any potential flooding, and it would just take, we just take the lowboy down, grab the excavator, it's down on baseline, haul it up. It's just Clint and I, part of a day to buck the trees up, move them out of the creek, and then move back down. So less than a day's work to do the project.
Okay. So would you be willing then to follow up with Tom and just let him know that you're going to be working on it?
He already said whatever we need to do, we're more than welcome to do it. He was just waiting for, I guess, county court response.
Okay.
Whether or not we could assist or not.
I mean, I think, I don't know how you guys feel, commissioners, but if it potentially would cause a problem to a county road, to me, that's just prevention and probably a smart thing to do.
Definitely.
Agreed.
Yeah, thank you, Dewey.
You bet. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll have that taken care of. And then the other thing that's in correspondence comes from our Veteran Services officer, and it's just his quarterly outreach numbers and activities. And I will say that Paul is doing an incredible job. Paul's doing an incredible job. I mean, every quarter he comes back with a long list of people that he's been helping. So this is just sort of a shout out as well to the community who may be listening to this later, is if you know a veteran, please connect them with Paul. They may not be aware of services that they are entitled to, and Paul is there to help walk everybody through, anything that they need help with, really. But he's been doing some incredible work, and so community, if you know veterans that need help, please help them connect with Paul Conway, because he's an incredible resource.
Good job.
All right, 4.0, which is the consent agenda. Questions on the consent?
I don't think I had any. Did you, Commissioner Ortherall?
I did not have any.
So I move to accept the consent agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda, which consists of consider approval of October 7th regular meeting minutes, consider approval of October 7th County Court Local Contract Review Board joint hearing minutes, consider appointment of Gib Wilkins to the Gilliam County Library Board effective October 21st, 2020 through June 30th, 2022, consider approval of Public Transportation Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund, or STIF, discretionary grant submittal request, and consider approval of Oregon Department of Corrections Coronavirus Emergency Supplemental Funding Subgrant Agreement number 6041. Is there further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay.
Thank you, Gib.
Yeah, thank you.
Unfinished business, second reading and adoption of ordinance number 2020-02 in the matter of the Gilliam County Economic Enhancement Fund. Just a quick recap that we conducted a work session back in September to discuss what are primarily administrative revisions to the Economic Enhancement Fund ordinance, which that is what dictates the disbursement and use of our host fees from Waste Management. On October 7th, we held a public hearing to receive public comment on those revisions, and the ordinance also received its first reading. And then in order for it to be adopted, the ordinance has to have a second reading at least 13 days after the first, which today would be just fine, before adoption can take place. So any questions or things to raise up, issues to raise?
Well,
I move to have the second reading of ordinance number 2020-02 by title only.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded that we have the second reading of ordinance number 2020-02 by title only. Is there further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, in the county court for the state of Oregon for Gilliam County, ordinance number 2020-02 in the matter of the Gilliam County Economic Enhancement Fund.
I move to accept the second reading by title only and adopt ordinance number 2020-02.
I second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to accept the second reading by title only and to adopt ordinance number 2020-02. Is there further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, 5.2 is consider approval of resolution number R 2020-33, a resolution adopting a volunteer policy. So just to refresh, we had this on our last agenda. The idea is this is part of our major policies and procedures process that we're doing. And again, the idea for this is to provide some clarity for what volunteers should expect during their volunteer service, make sure that we have a safe and healthy environment for them to volunteer in, and help connect them with volunteer opportunities. We did an initial review of the policy on October 7th. The court requested that we have some additional feedback, so I did have Marla go through and read it, given that she has the most probably volunteers out of all the departments. She was okay with it, had no recommended edits to the policy. Questions or comments on this one?
I move to adopt resolution number R 2020-33 as presented.
Second.
It's Been moved and seconded that we adopt resolution number R 2020-33 as presented. Is there further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. The next one is consider approval of resolution number R 2020-34, a resolution adopting a fleet safety and use policy. Again, this is a policy that we reviewed initially during our October 7th meeting. There were a couple of items changes that we made during that discussion, and particularly where we're talking about the, under number 3, under the driver qualifications and the 3 separate incidences. We changed that. I updated the driving matrix. And then there was also back on page, I believe, page 5, where we talk about accidents and incidents involving a Gilliam County vehicle or a personal vehicle while on Gilliam County business. And then we also took out a sentence about the proper backing, which would have required somebody to be outside the car and sort of, basically what we decided at the time was that we'd make those changes, and then you wanted me to bring back a clean copy for this meeting. And so that's what's before you.
I have a couple questions.
Okay.
So just to be clear, I just want to make sure I understand where we're headed with this. So if someone, one of our employees, somebody that works in the courthouse, doesn't do a lot of driving, but probably goes to an occasional meeting. If they end up having one of these offenses that makes them, puts them in the bad category, like say they have a DUI, on their own time, not driving a vehicle on county business or anything like that, are we going to help them get to their meeting? Are we going to find them a driver or something, or are they going to be fired?
Most likely what we would do, if it's not an essential, it depends on whether driving is an essential activity or essential duty of the employee. So if it is an essential duty, then that would be something we would have to look at, potential termination, most likely because they wouldn't have driving privileges. The state would revoke those under a DUI, particularly with like our road department with their CDLs and things like that. If it's an instance where it's not part of their essential duties, then most likely what we would say is either there's an accommodation and somebody else is going to the meeting, in which case they would just ride along, or we would probably say, hey, you're going to need to use Zoom until it's off your record, basically. So I think we can be creative. I don't foresee that we're going to have this situation come up. Most likely, if it did come up, it might be a DUI circumstance, and in which case it really depends on whether the employee has is driving as part of their essential duties. And for some instances, I mean, like if one of Gary's guys got a DUI, I think he would say that's an automatic termination. So, it kind of depends on the employee on how it would be handled.
Well, I do appreciate the compromises that have been made after our last meeting. So that was my question.
Okay.
Are you
Any
good?
other questions, comments?
No.
Okay.
I move to accept resolution number R 2020-34 as presented.
I'll second.
Go
It's
ahead.
been moved and seconded that we adopt resolution number R 2020-34 as presented. Is there further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries. Okay. Next up is consider approval of resolution number R 2020-37, a resolution adopting an alcohol, drug use, abuse, and testing policy. So again, this came up during the October 7th meeting, and we made a number of edits or discussed a number of edits which were incorporated. The big sticking point, if you guys remember, was the consent, search and consent language in the draft. And so what I did is go back to CIS pre-loss attorneys. The reason I went to them instead of our internal legal counsel is that it will be these attorneys that defend us if we have an incident with a employee. They're the ones that actually represent us in those cases. So I wanted to make sure that they were comfortable. What Tamara at CIS did was give us two potential options to look at, and I included both of those in the draft policy. So we just, if one of them sounds better than what the old language was, we just accept it or amend it with that option and then pass it with that. So the two options are, one is a search of county property. So this would basically limit searches to just those pieces of property which are county issued. So county vehicles, desks, offices, the idea being that, obviously those are that's county property. So the right for personal privacy within county property is, employees should not expect that. Tamara did suggest that we add the language in that last sentence, which says, in such incidences, Gilliam County will first inform the employee of the basis for the reasonable suspicion and provide the employee an opportunity to produce the item voluntarily. So again, the idea that rather than just go into somebody's office and start rifling through drawers, that we communicate with the employee on what we suspect is occurring and that they have the opportunity to produce the item that we suspect is there, if that makes sense. So that's sort of option one, which I would say is probably the most permissible in terms of, or most conservative, I think, in terms of the county's ability to search. The second option is search of property. Again, if reasonable cause exists, it would allow the county to search items or property that we have assigned, and then as well as personal belongings. Again, with the idea that before we searched personal belongings, that we would inform the employee of the basis for the suspicion and ask employees for permission to search the belongings in question. So those are sort of the two options that she came back with. And I wasn't sure, I didn't want to presume which way we would go. So I just included them both, and we'll leave that up to you guys to sort of discuss on which direction you prefer.
I prefer option one.
I thought you might. Is that where you are too, Sherry?
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay. So what we would do is if we wanted to go with option one, we could go ahead and make the motion, and then I'll just make sure on the policy when it gets signed and everything that option one is the one that sticks, and option two would be deleted out of the draft that you have.
I had a couple other questions.
Of course.
One of the things I was concerned about as I was reading through this latest version is marijuana. I was a little bit concerned about well, the whole idea of medical marijuana, and like maybe a situation where, say a doctor has prescribed to one of our employees, and maybe it's to sleep or something like that, something where they're not using it at work, they're not impaired when they come to work. Maybe it's something that their doctor has decided for them they need it to sleep or something like that. And I feel a little bit like I don't think it's up to me or us to weigh in on that arrangement between a doctor and his prescribed treatment. So I'm still a little bit concerned about the maybe just medical marijuana. And I was wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Sherry, thoughts on that one? I'll have you go first while I think about it.
I have a lot of thoughts on that one as someone who doesn't sleep. And what we were taking from here were following federal guidelines as opposed to like state guidelines, right?
Correct, yeah.
Well, I do know people who use and are prescribed for different reasons, but so, yeah, I have to kind of agree with that we are if we're stepping into a prescribed not being abused, because again, you go back to, the prescription for opioids, which if abused are causing a problem as well. So you kind of have to put both of those together, I think is.
Okay. So would it, like, here's what we could maybe do. Hold on one second. Just give me a second. I'm going to try to just bring it up on our screen so we can see.
While you're doing that, can I further expand?
Of course.
You do.
I did talk to, and this is just a general change that I would recommend we make to this document. I talked with Pamela with CIS, and she mentioned that on page 2, there's a line in here that takes this policy from a no impairment policy to a zero tolerance policy. And she said a lot of counties are just going with a no impairment policy if we're really just concerned about people when they're at work. And she said if we remove the line that says employees may not have any detectable amount of narcotic, hallucinogen, stimulant, sedative, drug, or other controlled substance in their system while on Gilliam County property or on Gilliam County time. She says by cutting that one sentence, we would go to a no impairment policy. And she says that doesn't mean that as an employer, we cannot discipline for having a detectable amount, but it allows the county to determine if and what discipline would be imposed. So I felt like that gave us a little bit more flexibility, and that would be my recommendation, is to strike that line.
So this line that I'm highlighting right here, is that one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So are you, Sherry, did you say you're in agreement with cutting that?
Yeah, I've read Pamela's recommendation and her opinion on how that works. And I think that gives us the leeway that we need to make either or type of decision as opposed to being totally zero.
Okay, so I can strike that. And then let's go down to the medical marijuana. So let's say, are you thinking, let me see where it's all mentioned. If we took out this first phrase that said, with the exception of medical marijuana, so it just starts with, nothing in this rule is intended to prohibit the use of a drug taken under supervision. Is that would be an initial start. Is that what you're thinking, Leslie?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to do nothing like this. And then I think it's mentioned again. Let me just read really quick. I think it's mentioned just again here in this last paragraph. So is the idea that we would strike that entire paragraph? Is that what you guys are thinking?
Where are you at?
Prescription drugs and medical marijuana on page 3.
I got lost. I'm sorry.
Here on your screen, here I'll highlight it too.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
So just cut that is what we're thinking.
Okay.
Sherry, are you okay with that?
Yes. Now,
Okay.
what you have on your screen,
So I,
it starts, nothing in this rule is intended to prohibit the use, but what I printed out says, with the exception of medical marijuana, nothing in this rule is intended to prohibit use.
She just
Yeah, I
struck it.
You just struck that when I
struck
was
it.
reading, looking for something else.
While
Okay.
you were reading, I was one step ahead of you.
Yeah, well, that's common for you to be a couple of steps ahead of me.
Was there anything else that we wanted to tinker with?
I'm good.
I thank you. I appreciate the compromises on those. I still, you know, I still feel that we're getting a little too involved in what employees do on their own time, but I think that I'm far happier with it now.
Okay.
So that means that I can do that to sleep. Thank you very much. I'm not, but I could.
You could, if you wanted to, you could. Any other edits or things that we wanted to look at? And if not, I'll stop sharing my screen.
I don't think so. Leslie?
I don't think so.
Okay, I'll stop sharing then, and I'll just make sure I've saved that.
This is also a living document as well, too, something that if we find that we need to revise it later on, we can.
Yeah, again, the idea with all of these, and this will be part of Lisa in her HR, with her HR hat on, that every fall about this time, the idea is that she'll take a look at all of these and also look and see if anything's changed from a state or federal perspective that needs to be updated. And then what I've asked the elected officials is, as things come up during the year that maybe a policy didn't address or didn't quite address it the way we thought it would, that she flag those, and then we can refine every year when incidences come up. The other big thing is next year we'll be renegotiating the collective bargaining agreement, so there may be some things that need to be changed to keep these policies in alignment with whatever that contract ends up looking like. So, any other edits for this one?
I don't have any.
Is there a motion?
Hang on, I'm being technologically challenged right at the moment.
Would you like me to make the motion?
I've done something to my screen and now I can't see anybody.
Oh no. So I'll make a motion while Sherry's getting her screen sorted. So I would move to incorporate the search language option 1 in the alcohol, drug use, abuse, and testing policy, as well as the other amendments discussed today, and to adopt resolution number R 2020-37 as amended.
I second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we incorporated the search language option 1, as well as the other amendments discussed today in the alcohol, drug use, abuse, and testing policy, and to adopt resolution number R 2020-37 as amended. Is there further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Okay, let me just catch up here.
I have to grab something real quick.
All right.
Keep going. I can hear you.
Okay, so next one up is consider approval of resolution number R 2020-39, a resolution establishing cancellation limits for tax collection. So I'm just looking, I don't see Nathan on there, but Kelly is on there if we end up with questions. Hey, Kelly.
Kelly?
So Kelly, I'm going to do my best to summarize this, and then if you can correct me and make sure that I don't misstate what we're actually doing here. So basically, Commissioners, ORS allows the county court, and through our authorization, the tax collector, which would be Nathan, the authority to cancel tax payments that are slightly under the actual amount due. The treasurer and tax collector, Nathan, is requesting that we harmonize the limits of cancellation, which are the underpayments, and retainage, which are overpayments, by setting the cancellation limit at the maximum of $10 allowed under, oh, I see Nathan back there, under law. So that current limit right now is $1 or less for underpayments. So that means if somebody is like, I don't know, there's a little bit of interest and they miss it by, say, $1.30, Nathan and Kelly have to go try to collect that $1.30. And so basically what we're saying is the cost to go collect the amount of underpayments between $1.01 and $10 far outweighs what we would actually get in revenue from them going after it. Just, I mean, them spending 15 minutes on it already would cost more money than than what we'd actually get back, probably. So, so the resolution before you basically just raises that cancellation limit, which is for underpayments, to $10. Did I get it all, Nathan and Kelly? Nathan gives a thumbs up.
Yep. I think you covered it.
Questions, Commissioners, on what we're doing and why?
No, very, very clear what we're doing and why.
Okay.
I move to adopt resolution number 2020-39 as presented.
I'll second if you add the R.
Oh, gosh, I cannot do the R.
Yes, yes, you must.
R.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt resolution number R 2020-39 as presented. Is there further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, next one up is consider adoption of Code of Financial Ethical Conduct. Again, I'll just key this up, Kelly, if you're still there.
I'm still here, yes.
Okay, so this is basically another request coming from the treasurer. He's requesting that we consider adopting a code of financial ethical conduct. And the draft that's before you was modeled on a code of conduct that was developed by the National Government Financial Officers Association. It came out of a scientific study they did on leading from the top and encouraging honesty. And the study basically said that setting expectations such as these are as effective in stopping financial fraud as many policies. And so this is something that elected officials took a look at. They were on board with promoting. It's not technically a policy in that it's not setting specific rules. This is more of like a moral code or guidance. But we thought it would be a nice or a important gesture to come from the county court, from the top down, that this is the expectation of all of our employees as they're handling financial transactions. So Nathan and Kelly, I don't know, they look like they've got somebody in their office, but I don't know if they have anything more to add to that, or if you guys have any questions of Nathan.
I didn't have any questions.
I didn't either. Yeah.
Nathan, anything to add that I missed?
No, you did good. It's pretty straightforward, I think, and I seem to have good buy-in by all the other elected officials. It's not, you know, legally binding or anything. It's a goal. It's kind of like what you're working on earlier today. So our goal in the treasurer finance office is just to not encourage fraud. As funny as that sounds, but tone from the top's real important in that process. So.
Okay, thank you. I move to adopt the Gilliam County Code of Financial Ethical Conduct as presented.
Second.
Been moved and seconded that we adopt the Gilliam County Code of Financial Ethical Conduct as presented. Is there further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Next one up is consider approval of resolution number R 2020-40, a resolution adopting an employee safety policy. Again, this is more of our policy work that we're trying to get all cleaned up. And this one in particular is a draft safety policy. It establishes protocols related to emergency response and workplace safety to ensure that we have a safe and healthy work environment. This one in particular, the draft language came originally out of CIS's pre-loss attorneys. Lisa and I took the first stab at sort of getting it into shipshape. Then Teresa, as our safety officer, reviewed it. Chris Fitz reviewed it as the emergency management coordinator. The elected officials all reviewed it as well. And so it's gone through all of those sort of hoops before it got here. And for the most part, people had very little concerns or questions about it. It's really pretty straightforward, having to do with exiting the building. And then just to note that there's a bigger safety manual that the safety committee itself puts together and updates that doesn't come before the county court. We just sort of give them the authority to do that to ensure that the more in-depth kind of safety protocols are put in place and reviewed by that committee. So to give you some context of why it's such a small safety document. The big binder is in Teresa's office if you ever want to read it.
Yeah, no, that'll be okay. I'll ask Teresa and she'll be able to point out the exact place where I need to read.
Find it right away.
Right?
So Teresa is our safety officer?
She is, yeah.
And who is our emergency response coordinator?
That would be Chris Fitz.
That's what I figured. So this bigger manual, does it have like a sheet or something on what to do in a bomb threat? Like what questions you would ask a caller when they, called in a bomb threat, that type of thing?
I believe so, but I would need to defer probably to Teresa on what exactly is in the manual.
We actually, for a bomb threat, we actually all have papers. Let me turn my camera back on, that are under our phone,
Right.
like this. We all have them under our phone, so we can address a caller. And the safety manual just has everything you could think of in there.
And so.
Great. Okay.
It's comprehensive.
Sounds like you're ready then.
Yeah, it's like 4 inches thick, so.
Oh.
Yeah.
Any other questions or any edits or concerns about this one?
No.
Do we have a motion?
I'm afraid to. I always drop an R.
Well, go ahead. Get it right this time.
Should I try again? Okay, so I move we adopt resolution number R 2020-40 as presented.
And I second.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt resolution number R 2020-40 as presented. Is there further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Okay, on to 6.4, discussion regarding job descriptions and spending thresholds policies. So these are sort of two other policies that I think might be beneficial for the county to put in place. But before I went forward with trying to draft, I wanted to get some direction from you all about where we should be going. So the spending thresholds one, I maybe will start with first, because that is definitely one that our procurement legal counsel, who is down in Eugene, said that we have to have in place. After we did the contracting one, Basically, that policy gave the county court as a body the authority to spend money, and it gave me as the executive officer or administrative officer of the county, but nobody else within the county. So that's obviously a problem. Folks need to be able to expend some money even for gas and things like that. And right now they don't technically have the authority to do that. So my idea is sort of that we would approach it with a tiered system that I just kind of wanted to run by you, where most of our employees would probably at maybe like a $3,000 threshold, which is where their credit card limits are right now. So that would kind of sync those two up. And then I'm thinking for some of our more senior folks, like the roadmaster, the chief of staff, for example, that we may set that threshold at $10,000. That's really the break between a simple procurement and an intermediate procurement where you have to go get bids, basically. And then the elected officials at a higher level. So for instance, the sheriff's office would be able to buy a budgeted sheriff's vehicle without having to come before the county court to do that. Gary would just need to get all the documentation in place and then could make the decision based on those bids that he receives. And then a slightly higher one that would be set for me, to be able to authorize other things that, if the roadmaster needed a piece of equipment that cost more than the $10,000 kind of thing, that depending on where that limit was set, it wouldn't necessarily have to go before the county court. So I just wanted to get your read on your comfort level with that. Normally anything that would be over the $10,000 would definitely come before the county court so that we could look at those bids. And so before I went down that path, I wanted to make sure that's really the question before you today is, are you comfortable with delegating some of that spending authority above $10,000 to elected officials and or me? And sort of get your thoughts on that.
Have we had problems, I guess, getting this on the agenda? I mean, has having to get county court approval, has that slowed down? Has that caused problems for our staff?
I mean, it's for things that are already budgeted, it's definitely a step. I wouldn't necessarily say that it causes problems, but there's a confusion about what's allowed to be purchased and when it's allowed to be purchased. So even if we kept that current idea that anything above $10,000 has to come before the county court, I'd still probably want a policy that spells that out, just because it's unclear to the staff when they're able to make a purchase on their own and when they need to come ask for permission. So I will say that from the elected side, they feel from or some of them at least feel from a philosophical matter that they should be entrusted to be able to make those purchases if the county court has budgeted for, say, a new vehicle, as an example, in the sheriff's office, that they shouldn't have to come back to the court to ask for permission a second time if they've been approved during the budget process.
Well, some of the line items that we have though in our budget are huge. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing it would do, for instance, is like for some of, say, Dewey's procurements that are maybe mid-sized procurements, so $40,000, $50,000, that may actually be more time sensitive, that would allow us to move those through more quickly. So it just kind of feels, it's just how you guys are feeling about how much you want to see those purchases and dig into them, and how much leeway you want to give to the elected officials and staff on making those purchases. I can make it work either way, but I just wanted to raise that and kind of get your take.
You're the budget
Commissioner
guru.
Wilkins?
You're the budget guru.
What do you think, Leslie?
You're the budget guru.
And
And keep in mind too that I can draft it and we can always tinker with it as we go. I just didn't want to I didn't want to make an assumption that was completely off base.
I think it's important that we do have a document that spells things out, because that has been an issue for people not realizing, this didn't really need to come before us, because you have that authority to purchase this, and it's budgeted and it's there, and but there's buts there. What do you think?
since we're talking about it, this is the first, discussion on it, and the first time we've heard those limits that you're considering, that you've been thinking about. I wouldn't mind seeing something in print. I think I do a little better when it's all written out. It makes it gives me new questions to ask when I see it in print. So I think we could start with a draft of something and maybe go from there.
Okay, so maybe what I'll do is I'll start from the most permissive point, and then we can dial it back as we need to, if that sounds.
That sounds good.
Okay.
Sounds good.
I will make that approach then, and we'll try to get a draft. If we don't have it by the next meeting, I'll at least try to have it by the December 2nd meeting. So we'll work on that. The second thing that has come up that I think would be good to have captured in policy is how we deal with job description updates. So obviously the history of this, you guys are well aware. The county court is entrusted with authorizing those updates right now. The way we do it is anytime there's an update, it's supposed to go through us. It's been sort of, I think, historically maybe hit or miss on how those actually get updated and whether they get updated in a timely fashion. And so there's just been some discussion internally about, is there a better way to do this? And so I went ahead and called some of our neighboring counties. I called Sherman, Morrow, and Wasco County just to see how they handle their job description updates. And so there's a couple of potential options that I've just laid out to try to get a sense of where comfort level is in terms of giving up probably some authority. And so I'll just walk through these and kind of talk about them, explain them a little bit more. Again, this one is maybe a little bit less pressing, but I do think it would be good to have this written down so everybody's on the same page about how we handle changes to job descriptions. So option one would be, in essence, like the county court authorizing the number of employees, the maximum FTE for each position, and the salary schedule for each position through the budget process and adoption of the annual salary schedule. Once those are in place, at least in one of our neighboring counties, that is really the role of their county court or board. Then from there, the elected officials sort of take over, or department heads take over, and they are responsible for developing and updating job descriptions for the positions that their court has authorized. So basically their rules are the elected official can't exceed the approved FTE because that would trigger a problem with the budget. So they have to stay within their budgeted FTEs, but they can reduce the FTE without county court approval. So if they decide that, they're 0.9 FTE, actually they can do it in 0.75, they'd be able to do that since there's no budget impact, or at least there's a positive budget impact. And so the way that this particular county does it is they draft the job description that then has to go to their HR person who checks to make sure that it has all the necessary information. Their HR person also does an initial check to see where they are in terms of compensation to make sure that that compensation rate would be within what's approved from the county court. And then it's also checked in this other county, it's checked by a financial officer. In ours, I would suggest that it come to me, and that I would ensure that it won't require an increase in compensation, which would exceed the budgeted amount. The other note that I have is if an update to a job description would result in a reclassification, so they would be, you know, maybe classified into, say, a management position or something like that, which would lead to an increase in compensation, that new salary schedule would have to first be approved by the county court before they could move forward. Let me see. In cases where reclassification would lead to a decrease in compensation and savings to the county, that wouldn't have to go before the county court. So basically, I think the takeaway from this is it would, under this option, it would only come to us. We set the budget, we set the FTE, we set the compensation for each position, and otherwise it's an administrative decision that happens within the county departments and offices. And under option one, that would mean all positions, all current positions and new positions would be created this way. There's another county that has sort of a hybrid of this, where they do mostly what's in option one, but their county court approves the initial job description and any reclassification. So any major changes, basically, to the job description. Minor changes, you know, like, oh, there's a typo here, or, you know, those kinds of things, the elected official is authorized the authority to make those updates. So that's sort of a hybrid position. And then option number 3 is similar to option number 1, except that those job positions that are under the county court all still come before the county court, whether it's a major or minor decision. So in essence—
That's option 3?
That's option 3. So, so the elected officials would be in charge of their own department job descriptions, but those that are underneath the county court would all come before the county court. Instead of, say, you, Leslie, doing the road and weed ones and me doing the rest of them kind of thing, they would all come before the full body. Right. And the 4th one is to maintain the current approval procedure, which is that they all come before us. And so we would approve all major and minor changes and all new creations. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. Again, this isn't necessarily a pressing policy, but if I have time, I might try to tackle it. And I just wanted to get a sense of your comfort level in terms of this would be a significant change than what we've been doing previously. But it was interesting that all of the other counties that are around us, I didn't ask Wheeler County how they do this, but the other 3 definitely are a little bit more, tackle it more administratively than they do legislatively within the court. So any thoughts or initial reactions to these? Obviously, a policy would have to be developed and refined, and all that, you know, all those little details would be worked out. But I just wanted to get a sense of if this is even something that we're interested in pursuing, or if maybe the approach is just for me to capture the current process in policy.
My initial response was that I preferred option 4.
Okay.
Well, I understand where the other electeds are coming from, where they get a little more leeway in their job descriptions. I just want to make sure that we're being consistent, because that's one of our strategic plans, is that we have consistency. And so how consistent are we in the option 1, where human resources and the county judge get to review? Is that where our consistency comes from? That we know that, you know, they're not going clear away from, so that the assessor's office is allowing his employees to do something that the treasurer's office is not, which would cause some kind of a friction. That's my concern, is are we making sure that there's consistency, or our expectations for each of the the non-elected officials or non-elected employees.
Yeah, and that's definitely something we would need to build in. I think that's the reason they have the HR check and the finance check in the other counties, is to make sure there's some consistency there. So that's a potential way to address it. The other option is just number 4, which is it's consistent because it all comes before the county court.
But can't we continue to make it consistent even if we went with option 1?
I think so. I mean, I think there's definitely some things that we can put in place that allows us to do that. And we may also look at maybe a middle ground is like maybe option number 2, where the county court's just reviewing major changes and new creations kind of thing. Whereas more minor things, if Gary wants to shift what's a relatively minor duty from one of his officers to the other, does the county court really need to weigh in on that, or can Gary just do that?
I'm wondering how much he goes to the trouble of change. I know people sometimes give different duties without a full job description, review. The problem I had with, I think, number 2 is that compensation decreases could occur without county court approval. I guess I balked a little bit at the having elected officials decide to cut pay for their employees without it coming before the county court.
Which we could definitely, again, these are what the other counties are doing. So if there was one that we thought with the modification could fit us, we can do whatever we like. So we could definitely say that if a reclassification is going to impact compensation, it has to go before the county court, or that change in compensation has to be approved first before it can move forward so there's 2 ways of sort of addressing it. One is whether you want to see every job description. The other way to address it is just saying if it has a budget impact, whether it's above or below the budgeted amount, it has to come before the county court.
I think that was my major heartburn. My area of most heartburn is just being able to decrease hours or decrease compensation. That's where my comfort level went down. The other thing I guess I would ask is how often are they changing job descriptions? I mean, is this once the job descriptions are renewed and in place, how often are they really tinkering with them?
Probably not. I suspect that the larger departments, so like Gary's, probably more often, because he's shifting between, as somebody leaves, he may have to shift responsibilities over to somebody else just because he has more people to try to coordinate. I don't anticipate the offices that have 1 or 2 people probably are changing much. Those are probably pretty consistent. Most of the changes, honestly, have probably been under our folks as we've shifted some stuff around. Things like the library board director being bumped up to full-time, those kinds of things that we've had come up. So it does make it a little bit simpler in terms of keeping track of what version has been approved. And that's sort of been our stumbling block, is that the previous county court did approve some job descriptions, but never signed them. And so when we're going through files, it's hard for us to determine which of these were approved already. Was this the version, those kinds of things. So if we stick with the current version or the current process, we would just probably want to figure out a better way of tracking what's the version that's actually authorized. So is it something, Leslie, could we approach this similarly initially to what we're doing with the spending thresholds and sort of draft a permissive policy to start with and then tighten it up? Would that?
I would be okay, but I would like to see the issue of compensation and cutting hours coming before the county court.
Okay.
And my concern is just being consistent so that each job description bears the same.
Okay, I'm just making notes here so I can make sure I capture this. Hours and compensation. Come to court. Okay. Again, this may not end up being something that actually gets to us until early next year. Just depends on when this baby decides to come and what else pops up between now and then. But I will at least try to start getting a draft together and having some internal discussions about some protocols we can put in place for that consistency, and then also addressing which issues should come back, you know, to Leslie's point about making sure that the county has a good a sight line of changes to compensation and hours and things like that.
Sounds good.
Does that sound workable?
Yep.
All right. Let's go on to 6.5 then, which is discussion regarding modernizing courthouse phone system. And Kelly is on the line. I will only kick this off by saying, ladies, that our phone system is very outdated and that it occasionally will just up and shut off completely for 10 minutes or more. And that has Kelly and myself kind of on pins and needles that there may be a day when it doesn't start back up. And so Kelly has been doing some research into some alternative options for us to consider to modernize the phone system so that we make sure that the public can communicate with us and that we can communicate with each other. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Kelly, to maybe walk through sort of what you've learned, the bids you've had come in, and kind of what you're recommending for the court.
Okay, so our phone system was installed probably in the 2011-12 fiscal year. I don't have the exact date. And we have a bunch of pieces of equipment in the server room. They have all but one reached end of life, end of support. So if something goes wrong with one of those pieces of equipment, there are no guarantees that they can fix it or you know, get us going, at least temporarily. That we have no guarantees there. So with the fact that Judge Farrar just mentioned the phones randomly shutting off over the last month or two, it's making this a little more high priority to get things switched over, get some new equipment, get a new plan. We need to get something done quickly. So I did some research on different types of phone systems available. We have our current system, which is a PBX system. So we do have a phone line coming into the building. It's not your traditional small phone line. It's called the PRI, and it handles multiple calls at a time. And when it comes into the building, it goes through different types of equipment, servers and routers and converters, and it gets routed out to our telephones in our offices. Upfront costs for this type of system are a little bit higher, quite a bit higher, because you have to replace all of that outdated equipment I mentioned a bit ago. Roughly, that would probably be about $15,000 altogether to replace that equipment. And then maintenance contracts are generally about $5,000 a year or so to keep that equipment supported. The other option is fully hosted VoIP systems, which require minimal on-site equipment. We would just have the phone switches, which those do need to be replaced at this time. They're also outdated, but it's just one piece of equipment there. And that's all we would need on site. So the phone comes through the internet, it goes to our switches, and the switches just route it to the different telephones in the offices. That's all we need on site. So the upfront costs are basically just buying the new desk sets and an implementation plan. So that was kind of what I decided to pursue in my research here because of the cheaper costs, and it's kind of the way the industry is trending. So Brad Brown with AgTech, our technology provider, and I got together. We made ourselves a request for bids, and we sent that out to a few different companies that he had previously worked with or approved of. He made some calls to find out who would be a good provider. So we sent our bid out to a few of them. And we got, let's see, 4 bids back. Most of them were weeded out fairly early in the process because of either they didn't meet our minimum requirements in our request for bids, or they had some security concerns or couldn't answer our questions on what levels of security they offer. So we had narrowed it down to the system provided by Microsoft and a system provided by 8x8. Microsoft and 8x8, their systems are fairly comparable. They both offer the same type of interface to use on a computer. You can use them with an app on your cell phone. It integrates with your email, or you can just use your plain old desk phone like you always have. For the people that don't want to dive into the new technologies, but there are so many new technologies available. It's really exciting. They both have the same kind of backup service if the internet goes out. They're constantly pinging our system to make sure they're receiving a signal back. If the signal doesn't come back, we can have that preset to auto forward to a phone number of our choice. So it could be a landline phone number, it could be a county cell phone number, however we decide to work that out so that phone calls still are coming through. Or people can still use the app on their cell phone using cellular data rather than using the internet on your computer or your desk phone. So there is backups. Our internet's actually pretty stable these days since we upgraded to WindWave, so I don't anticipate too many glitches or blips in the internet. Where I found a difference between 8x8 and Microsoft, well, there were 2. There was cost and the back office, so the management console where we set everything up. Microsoft was pretty cumbersome, as it tends to be, and I probably would need additional support from AgTech to configure things and keep up on configurations and reconfigure items. 8x8 was very user-friendly in their management console, very intuitive, the way you work through the menus, and it could mostly be done here in-house by me getting things set up and adjusted and adding new employees and rerouting voicemails and phone calls and things like that. And the price, Microsoft came in at about $13,000 for implementation and $1,300 a month after that, compared to just under $4,500 for implementation from 8x8 with $850 in recurring costs. So I think overall the ease of management and the lower cost 8x8's a good plan. Are there any questions at this point?
Kelly, can you kind of speak to, I think we had talked about the issue of porting numbers and those kind, I just wanted to make sure that that gets on the record as well.
So let's see. I must have just skipped right over that part when I was I was trying to summarize and not read this whole darn long thing. Here we go. So if we switch to a VoIP system rather than our PBX, which is more of a traditional type of phone line, we would no longer use Home Telephone Company as a phone service provider. They're our local company for our main courthouse phone system. They would still be providing service for our emergency services, such as our fire alarm, panic button, and the elevator and vault emergency phones, because those are required to use regular telephone lines for continuity of service in an emergency. And Home Telephone Company has a rare exemption that does not, it doesn't require them to port phone numbers. So if we do switch companies to a different actual telecom provider, we will need to get new phone numbers, and they won't be local because Home Telephone Company owns all of the local 384 phone numbers. So the plan there would be to have at least one toll-free number, possibly multiple, depending on how we sit down and decide to really break the system out and how to route the calls around. So local people could still make a toll-free call into the courthouse. The main toll-free number would have a staff directory, so you can press 1 for this office or this employee, or, that people would still be able to reach where they need to go without someone answering all incoming phone calls. And then during the transition, we would probably run both systems, home telephone and a VoIP system, concurrently for a few months, forwarding the home telephone calls to our new system so that people could still dial the numbers they're used to while we work on getting the word out there about new phone numbers. And hopefully that'll make the transition a little more smooth.
Will the numbers be like a direct, like if I know your number, I could call you directly, or do they all go right through the?
No, we would still have direct lines, and they just wouldn't be a local, 541-384 phone number. They would be what we consider long distance calls from local people.
Questions for Kelly?
Would the phone numbers be consistent? Like we would be assigned like a 371?
That's something I did not ask yet, but I will jot down a note to figure that part out.
Just in consistency.
Right. Good question. I like it.
Liz starts with 823 and I start with 371 and Leslie starts with 999. So it's very confusing of what the numbers are.
Okay. Any other questions? I'll let you know, Sherry, when I get an answer to that.
Thanks, Kelly.
I harassed Kelly all yesterday, and we talked about some of it. What is this? How does this? I guess my really only concern was just the effect on our local business of switching over to VoIP.
Mm-hmm. So it would affect Home Telephone Company. Obviously they'd be losing our business. They cover a fairly decent sized area out here. Their base is in Mount Vernon, Oregon. So, it's not just Condon that they have their business from, because I think that would be a little more detrimental to them if they were just Condon and we took away our business. I haven't had any discussions with them at all, so I don't know, how big of their income we are. But yeah, it's a tough one to consider, taking away local business.
Mm-hmm. So commissioners, what are you thinking? I mean, we don't necessarily need a motion today because there's a contract that would be associated with this that hasn't been through legal counsel. But before Kelly and I got too far down, we wanted to kind of just check in to see, are we on the right track? Are you comfortable with the idea of moving over, or what other questions need to be answered to make a decision?
I think my main concern is it going to be user friendly, to our residents. I know that I try to call someone who works at a business where when I dial what I think is their number, I get the main switchboard, and then I have to try to remember what extension they are and go through that whole process. And I'm looking at you. I'd like to avoid, if there's some way we can avoid that pickup, make it as
It's a
user-friendly.
pretty customizable system, it looks like. We did a demo and got a walkthrough of the management console and how you can set up the different phone numbers, and different offices can be grouped together, or people can have a direct line. And of course, the phone numbers will be on the website for people to look up. They'll be, we'll get the word out as best we can to what the new phone numbers are. And then the 800 number with the staff directory, it has quite a few options of how to configure that. And I think we'll probably take some time to sit down and really think through what would be the best route for our situation with the least number of button pressing, because nobody likes to, have to select 5 options before you finally get to where you want. So that's all in the planning phase and the setup phase.
Kelly, if we have an 800 number that our residents can call in on, are we going to have a live person that answers the phone, or is it going to be an automated message? My original thought, and this can be, discussed and changed, but my original thought would be to start with an automated message so that someone doesn't have to answer every single call entering the building, but maybe have one of your first options right off the bat, press 1 to speak to someone. Or if you, press 2 to listen to a list of offices, or, there's a lot of work that'll go into setting up that tree of options.
Right.
But I know one of my pet peeves when I call a number and get a menu is that you never find the press this button to talk to somebody. And, you want to talk to a human.
Yeah.
It would be
Or
good to
that's
have
the last option. I was going to say that's the last option they list. So you have to
Yes.
listen to 5 minutes of everybody
Early
else.
on.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
it's like press 0 to get an operator, which is what you really wanted the first. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to make it as user-friendly as we can. I want to make sure that people are, getting the options they want to hear and getting their calls through quickly.
Yeah, I dragged my feet at Waste Management for a long time, and then corporate came in and just gave us a new system whether we wanted it or not. And building that tree and trying to continue to have that main contact was an interesting process. So that was a while ago, so I'm sure it's easier these days.
It's tough. It's tough to switch over phone systems. So, good job, Kelly, wanting to tackle.
A lot of work. I've been there. I've been there. I feel your pain. So
in terms of next steps, are we thinking that if we can sort of sort out this tree issue with the 800 number and make that as user-friendly as possible, other than that, is the feeling generally that we'd like to pursue a switch and that this is the company to pursue? Or I just need some direction on whether I should be sending that contract to legal counsel, or whether you want to think about it some more or need more information to make a decision.
Well, I think it's something that we're going to have to take on, so we might as well do it now, as rather than later when we don't have any phones at all, or we come into a big expense because some of that equipment goes down, and it's going to cost us that much more to bring us back up in the interim. So I think it's a step that I would like to see us make.
I think that Kelly's gone to a lot of work putting this together, and so I'm good with going with staff recommendation.
Okay, so I will get the contract sent over to our legal counsel and just get her sign off to make sure there's no red flags, and I'll bring that back to either on the 18th when we're back in session or the 2nd, depending on how quickly she turns that around. And then that way we can kind of give Kelly marching orders to move forward. And at that point, we can accept the bid if you guys are comfortable with doing that. Does that work for you?
That's good.
Okay.
That's good. Thank you.
So we'll put that back on the agenda once we hear back from legal counsel. Thanks, Kelly, for all your work on this.
Great work. Good job.
Judge Farrar,
Yes.
since we're now moving kind of off the policies into other things, I just wanted to say something real quickly, or I will forget if I wait till the end of the meeting. But I just wanted to commend Lisa and the staff that worked on all these policies, because I know it was a huge undertaking, and you know they've turned out really well, and we got some of that housekeeping stuff taken care of, and now we can move on to some hopefully more exciting stuff.
I know, big picture stuff once we get all of these. Yeah, I could not agree more. This was a huge undertaking. As you will see, the employee handbook is coming up next meeting, and that was a monster to get through. But once we have those in place, I think we've got a pretty good slate of policies now, and that will really move us forward on that first strategic goal of getting, we can't be consistent without having something written down first. And so that's sort of the first step. So I'm excited about it too. Every time we finish one, my policy nerd hat is like, yay. So, okay, let's move on to 6.6, which is consider approval of modification to Lions Club fiscal year 2020-2021 capital investment grant program. So this, just as a refresher, the Lions Club was a recipient of a $77,000 capital investment grant for this current fiscal year to install an ADA bathroom. And so the contractor, which is China Creek Construction, has been in touch with Kelly throughout this process just to make sure that he fully understands the parameters of the grant agreement. And I think what the Lions Club has come to is that they actually thought it might be useful to have sort of a pole building that had the bathroom in it, along with the storage area, and maybe that would allow for a small meeting space as well. But before the contractor started, he wanted to make sure that that was allowable under the grant agreement. The grant agreement itself is pretty specific to the ADA bathroom. So if we wanted to allow it, I just would suggest, just for cleanliness and the paperwork, that we would update the grant agreement just to make clear that that building is allowed, so that there's no question about that with the public or anybody else, that that's approved. We have gone back and forth with the contractor to make sure that they could stay within the original budget, and sort of made clear that if this building pushed it beyond the budget, that the Lions Club would need to figure out how to come up with those additional funds, that the county wasn't going to be kicking in additional grant funds this fiscal year to help them complete the project. But I wanted to get a sense from you guys if you thought this was allowable, and if so, to sort of get marching orders in terms of updating that. And Kelly, did I miss anything, or did I get it?
I think you covered it pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, my question was, they asked us to help them finance their ADA bathroom. And to me, it was, those funds are to construct that portion of their building, and, whatever else they do is their own money if they want to build the storage unit in addition to their bathroom. So I'm kind of looking forward to it. So,
Leslie, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm okay with it. It's kind of refreshing that they came and asked, if they could make this change, and didn't just do it. Not that
Right.
the Lions Club does that, but you know, other entities have. So yeah, I thought this is good.
Yeah, and I think your point too, that we make sure that everyone knows that they didn't just go ahead and do whatever they wanted, and that we are aware that their building is going to be bigger than just a bathroom, and that our portion of it is to support that ADA bathroom and the rest of the structure as well. So I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good. I'm excited. I hope they get it built pretty soon, because
That's wonderful.
it'll be exciting to have a real bathroom.
Dewey, did you have something to add? You came off mute.
No, I just came off mute because the bridge is next.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure we didn't miss you.
No.
So with that, I'm wondering do you guys think we should amend the grant agreement just to make clear that that building is allowed? And if so, could I get a motion to that effect?
If you and Kelly feel it's necessary to amend, then I am for the amendment. Otherwise,
In
Kelly,
my
what do you think?
in my conversations with the builder, it sounds like they may not use all the grant funds just on the bathroom portion. So the grant funding may spill over into some of the other portions of the building. And that's kind of where my concern came in, that I wanted to make sure we were in line with the contract.
okay, good.
So I think just to keep the paperwork clean, it would be good, I think, to have a motion so that there's just not any question.
Okay, well then I move to amend the fiscal year 2020-2021 Capital Investment Grant Award to the Arlington Lions Club, allowing the grant funds to be expended for the construction of a pole barn, including a gathering meeting space and an ADA bathroom, and authorize the county judge to prepare and execute an amended grant agreement reflecting the same. We need to state anything about the funds don't change, or is that?
I think that's probably sufficient. I would second that as well. But I think we won't change the funds in there, so it'll still be the $77,000. So it's been moved and seconded that we amend the fiscal year 2020-2021 Capital Investment Grant Award to the Arlington Lions Club, allowing the grant funds to be expended for the construction of a pole barn, including a gathering meeting space and an ADA bathroom, and to authorize the county judge to prepare and execute an amended grant agreement reflecting the same. Is there further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, moving on into 6.7, which is discussion regarding Lonerock Bridge change order request. So I will just tee this up and then I'll toss it over to Dewey, but in your packet, you received a letter from Anderson and Perry, which is the project manager on the Lonerock Bridge replacement project, regarding a change proposal that was submitted by Waldron and Sons, which was the contractor on the project. This was related to a delay the contractor claims occurred in early June. So the Anderson-Perry letter pretty well summarizes what sort of the events were, so I won't really go into those, but it also talks about the correspondence back and forth, what they believe are the contractual provisions that are relevant, and then their belief that there's no additional payment warranted. And so the purpose today really is to just make the county court aware of this. We have not run this by our legal counsel to make sure that her reading of this is the same as Anderson-Perry, but I wanted to make sure that it's on the record, and then I'll toss it over to Dewey and have him fill in anything that I missed.
Thank you, Judge. I actually have Jaden Herron here. He was the project manager for Anderson-Perry. So if you have any questions, Jaden is here to answer those. The bridge project, it actually went very well, other than this little hiccup, I guess. The old bridge was removed. The new bridge is installed. It's paved, cleaned up. It looks really nice down there, as you can see from the photos.
Yeah, it's great. So commissioners, I assume you had an opportunity to read Anderson Perry's letter. Do you guys have any questions for them? I mean, my initial thought is that we would probably just send this to legal counsel as a precaution to make sure that their reading is the same, and that if they are in concurrence, that we wouldn't, I would maybe just be looking for you guys to say that we would, in essence, take no action on it, and that I would be probably just authorized to inform the contractor that we're not paying, basically. Is that
Yes.
okay?
Yeah, based on what the communication was, and yeah, they know.
Yeah, I thought Anderson, the letter laid out the circumstance really clearly. So my feeling is that I would accept their Anderson and Perry's recommendation, and so long as county council agrees with that assessment.
Yes.
Dewey, does that sound?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Okay. Does that work for you? And Jaden, that works for you?
Yes, it does. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here to answer any questions you guys have. And I think that's a good approach. And I look forward to hearing what legal counsel has to say about the matter as well.
Okay. So I will send this over to Carrie Connolly, which she does our procurement in particular. That's her specialty. So I'll have her just look at this and make sure. But it seemed pretty straightforward to me. I mean, we weren't even under a contract at the time, so I don't know how much more clear cut you can be. So anyway, okay. Anything else on this particular issue?
I don't have anything.
Okay, then let's move on to 6.8, which is consider approval of purchase of road department vehicles. So again, I'll just key this off, Dewey, and then turn it over to you. So it looks like we're in need of a new vehicles for the roadmaster and the crew. And Dewey has gone ahead and gotten the needed bids for both options. I will note for the one that includes the state bid in and of itself is sufficient because of, so that particular vehicle where Dewey's recommending we take the state bid, that doesn't actually need to have 3 bids because it's a state bid and they've gone through that process instead. The state has undergone the procurement process. So I don't know, Dewey, if you want to lay out sort of what the bids that you're recommending we accept are, and then we can move forward.
The state bid is for just a general road department pickup for the crew. It's replacing a 12-year-old pickup, starting to have minor issues and stuff with it. That's the one we could get off state bid. The other pickup, which is the Roadmaster's pickup, which I normally do most of the heavy haul, heavy pull stuff with mine. That's why it's a diesel. I got Gary Gruner gave us a quote. I contacted the Dow's, talked to 2 different entities down there, never got any response back. And then, so I went through Sourcewell, National Auto Fleet Group, which is another form of state bid. It's more of a larger entity that will do this. And their price was outrageous for the same pickup. And so I would recommend state bid for the crew pickup and Gruner Motors for the replacement of the Roadmaster's pickup.
Great. Questions for Dewey?
I don't have any questions for Dewey.
I didn't have any.
Okay.
Can I
Okay.
go ahead and make a motion?
Dewey will make some motions unless you have anything more to add.
Just that if it is approved, that the 2 pickups that we have be put up for surplus, and we'll offer them for whatever the county does as far as their surplus vehicles, if they go to bid or what we do for them.
Okay.
Get rid of them.
Yeah, after we wrap up, Dewey, if you can just touch base with Teresa, and it depends on how much. We just passed a new surplus policy, so it depends on how much we think they're going to be worth, on whether they need to come before the county court or whether you and I can just take care of that.
Okay, because they did tell me, everybody that I talked to, that it's going to be some time before the pickups are going to be available. Just because of the COVID stuff, production is way down, and what we're looking, we basically have to have them build the pickups for us.
Got it. Okay. So do we have motions, ladies, for the 2 new pickups?
Yes, I move to accept the bid from Gary Gruner Chevrolet in the amount of $44,566 for the purchase of a 2021 Chevrolet 3500 Crew Cab.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded that we accept the bid from Gary Gruner Chevrolet in the amount of $44,566 for the purchase of a 2021 Chevrolet 3500 Crew Cab. Is there further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Did you vote, Leslie?
Yes, I kind of simultaneously.
Okay. All those opposed? Motion carries. And then for the cruise vehicle.
I move to accept the bid from the state of Oregon in the amount of $27,040 for the purchase of a 2021 Chevrolet 2500 regular cab.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we accept the bid from the state of Oregon in the amount of $27,040 for the purchase of a 2021 Chevrolet 2500 regular cab. Is there further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, Dewey, go for it.
Thank you very much.
Pickups. And then if you can just touch base with Teresa on when you're ready to, for the old pickups to surplus those, we can figure out which process we need to go through.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Dewey.
Bye.
Bye, Dewey.
So next one on the list is discussion regarding maintenance needs and long-term management ownership funding solution for Condon swimming pool. So I see we have some city folks on. Catherine and Tom Fatlin are both on. Let me just sort of bring you up to speed on kind of where we are and what's occurred. So beginning back in 2010, the school board basically started indicating that they really wanted to get out of the pool business. And so way back when this was occurring, there was a swimming pool advisory committee that was formed that had the city, the county, the school district, and the chamber sort of at the table to try to figure out how to address the short-term management need and then the longer-term, what are we going to do with the pool need. So one of the outcomes of the pool committee's work was this current partnership that we have where the city leases the pool from the school district, and then the county does the administrative management of the pool every summer, and the county provides the funding, the financial piece. So all of this was originally outlined in a concept to sustain the Condon swimming pool document, which is in your packet. So in the original document, it says that the county would provide ongoing funding for maintenance, repair, and operation of the swimming pool. And the city will enter into an IGA to document, or that we would enter into an IGA with the city to document our funding commitment for future operation and maintenance of the pool. In addition, it also says that the swimming pool committee will continue to meet to formulate a long-term solution. for what we're going to do with the pool. So the partnership has worked, I think, fairly well over the last decade. Obviously, I've only been a party to it for the last 2 years, but it seems to have sort of held. But what ended up happening is they never really came up with a long-term solution for the pool. And right now, there are some pretty significant maintenance needs that are coming up that are sort of raising the question of who's responsible for the finances of the maintenance. So I think the school district has indicated, and I've been to city council meetings and school district meetings about this, the school really wants no part of it, I think would be safe to say, that they don't want to submit grants, anything. And the city obviously didn't sign on to do the finances. They signed on to do the admin. And so I think they also are feeling like it's not their property. It's not really their responsibility to do the funding for the maintenance. And so that has sort of led to, I think, a potential breakdown in the partnership, or could lead to a breakdown in the partnership long term. And so what I wanted to do, and sort of my purpose here, what I told both boards that I would be doing, is just, one, raising this document, which is the only, Teresa has gone through the Commissioner's Journal, and it seems to be the only documentation that we can find of what the county thought their commitment might be, other than the IGAs with the city, which are pretty well silent on the maintenance issue. And so I wanted to get a read from you guys of, one, originally the county appeared to be willing to provide ongoing funding for maintenance and repairs. I wanted to see if that is still the case, or if we feel like, because we have this competitive grant program, that really is the mechanism that the funding needs to be sought. And then secondly is whether we have an interest in restarting the pool committee and this long-term discussion of what needs to happen with the pool. And that would be not something that we're necessarily driving. I would probably just participate, because it's really a community decision, not a county decision. It's really up to the community here to decide what they want to do with the pool. But one thing I thought that maybe we might be able to offer, given that there's a lot of passion on all sides about the pool, is maybe even looking at providing some funding for like a neutral meeting facilitator to come in and sort of help facilitate a community discussion about what to do with the pool. So those were sort of the two issues that I wanted to raise and get some feedback from you on, so that we can I can help the parties sort of figure out a path forward.
I guess my first question is the actual property belongs to the Condon School District?
Cool.
So
It does.
Although they own the building and the property it sits on, they don't want to do anything with the pool. So
Exactly.
how does the liability, who's paying the liability insurance?
That might be a question for Catherine. Catherine, are you on?
Getting there.
Who covers the insurance?
Is that
So-
part of the operating costs?
Yes. So what happens, what happens is we both have liability insurance on there. They have property insurance and we have liability insurance for operating it.
And what does that cost you? Can you speak to that?
You know, it's built into ours. It's not broken out, Sherry. It's not a huge amount, the insurance part of it. I don't know what the school pays for theirs. So, but I want to make sure too, is that in all this administrating work that we have done the last 10 years, my time has never been built into that. Our public works time has never been built into that. What it comes, all we have been reimbursed for, which is very appreciative, is we just send over, and you guys get them, all the payroll that operates the pool and the fixes to it. And I want to, until the county was paying for everything, until you guys started your competitive grant agreement. So that's kind of where it came to a head. So I didn't know if Tom Fatlin is, I hope he can unmute, that he's there. If he wanted to add anything in about it.
Hey, Tom.
Hello there. How's
Sorry to
everybody?
put you on the spot.
That's all right. At least I'm not in my pajamas. Not really. Yeah, it's just a historical perspective on the. We kind of we didn't force them, but we tried to make it that the school would have some skin in the game by making them keep ownership of the pool, because they wanted to get rid of the whole thing. But that hasn't helped. You know, they still just do not want to do anything. Like Catherine said, that's kind of where we're stuck at. If we get to the competitive grants, it's their property. We were kind of trying to ask them to, submit the grants since it's their property. We will, still run the pool. We'll administer, doing the improvements, but we were trying to get them to put in a little effort into it, but they don't seem interested at all. Even if you gave them the money without the matching money, they still are not interested in pursuing that grant from you guys. So it's just a little frustrating on our end. I guess what we do need to do is find a longer term solution to this.
Yeah, my concern is that they own the property and they're kind of washing their hands of the total responsibility for it. And the long-term fixes, we've been putting a Band-Aid on the maintenance issues, and it needs some major repairs in order to make it operational. Those are my two concerns. That we're putting our energy into something that belongs to an entity that doesn't want to have anything to do with it. That's very concerning.
I think
Leslie,
a meeting facilitator sounds like that would be a good idea.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think the meeting facilitator will help future plans. They have made it abundantly clear, the school district, that they're washing their hands of it. They're not going to participate in anything. So I don't think a mediator, I don't know, Tom, you might feel differently, or Liz, you've been at the meetings, maybe it would be different. I think the bottom line comes down is whether we keep the pool open or not.
Mm-hmm. So maybe I've put the cart before the horse a little bit. I'm wondering if maybe the best approach is to have the community discussion first about steps forward, and then talk about funding, so that we're clear what the part, because maybe there's another idea out there. I mean, maybe there's another approach to take. It may be worthwhile to explore sort of those options on, the initial question the community's got to answer is keep it open or close it, or find an alternative if it's not going to be this pool. Is there a pool elsewhere that we're going to support or build, or, something, I don't know. But, and then after that, if the idea is we're keeping this current pool, and then the next question is who's going to run it and how are we going to fund it long term then? And so maybe those questions need to be answered before the county commits funds, so that we actually see what the long-term plan is. They sort of did it in reverse. They committed the funds first and asked for the long-term plan to come back. I'm wondering if maybe we need to say the long-term plan needs to be in place first, and then we'll talk about funding. Does that make, City, what do you guys think about that approach?
Go ahead, Tom.
Or am I being crazy? I don't know.
No.
I worry about putting the money in, having it go forward again for another 5 years until it disintegrates, you know, it's like the long-term plan just keeps getting kicked down the road. So I'm not sure, and I'm open to like whatever we could do to sort of push the community to make that long-term plan and then have the county figure out how to help fund that or facilitate that.
I guess my question would be, how would you do that? And then would we look at this as a regional thing, like trying to get, you know, I know the Arlington area sends up kids for swimming lessons, and Wheeler County also. So were you looking at it as a regional thing or just a local?
I think we'd be open to what you guys think might work. I mean, I wasn't part of the original discussion, so if maybe a broader conversation is what's needed, you know, we could help facilitate that. I don't think I mean, I don't know, I can't speak for Sherry and Leslie. I don't have a preconceived notion of what the end result should look like. I think we just want to be helpful in trying to figure out how to get a long-term solution, regardless of what it looks like.
I agree that we need to have a long-term solution, but I think one of the short-term things we need to determine is if there's money available to make it swimmable while we go through the process of a long-term plan.
Okay.
That being said, you know, if the county was willing to put in, you know, you just gave us a grant to do some of the small things. What the school was going to do was apply for a grant for something larger. But I think it's time to relook at the pool to see if we want to put a lot more money into it. But in the meantime, is there money to make it safe for another year? If the city wants to do it, I can't tell you if the council is going to approve the lease and want to continue in the situation that we're in. With the owners not wanting to even write a letter in support of it to the county, not sure the council wants to be in that partnership. But what I would like to take to the council is there a plan that possibly there's enough money to make some minor repairs, say up to 10,000, to run it for another year while we get our long-term plan into place? Does that sound, Tom, does that sound fair? What I'm saying too is don't say that if you say, oh, we're going to give you 10,000, now you have to make sure you run the pool. I can't guarantee that until after we meet on November 4th, whether the council is going to agree to that. But I think it would go a long ways if we had some sort of money commitment towards repairs to make it operational next year. That might be a way to bring to the council also. And Tom, you might have a different way of what we want.
Well, I just wanted to make sure that the commissioners and Judge Farrar I think Judge Farrar is familiar with what the problem is with the lining in the pool, that we have is everybody familiar with what they were going to ask for about the lining, cutting the feet of people?
I am.
Okay, everybody's okay. I mean, that's why it's kind of crucial to, if we do keep operating it, to have that done this year somehow, either relined or hopefully we can get it done something cheaper. So
yeah, so commissioners, it goes back to the question of whether the guidance to the parties is that they need to come through the competitive grant or whether we're willing to provide that funding outright. It's really how we read this original sort of document on whether we think the county court intended to continue to provide ongoing repair funds, or whether now that we have a competitive grant process, we would prefer they go through that process. In which case, that might just be us getting creative.
It doesn't sound like there's anyone that's interested in applying.
No, they won't apply.
I know it's now you see why I put it on the court's agenda. It was above my pay grade. So
But I totally agree that we need to have a look at possibly closing that pool. Due to the condition, it's 65 years old, Tom, I think it is. It's over 60.
Yeah, it's in this, yeah, somewhere in
And
there.
yeah, and so there needs to, well, and I had a discussion with the city manager of John Day, and they're going through the same thing, and they have just decommissioned their pool. They did not even open it this year, decommissioned it, and are in a struggle of another pool. But he had a good point. He said, you know what the most important thing is we have to figure out if this is a priority of the community.
Yeah.
And regionally. I mean, we did get, before COVID, we had buses coming from Spray, Mitchell, Fossil, and Arlington for swim lessons because it was the right price and we had good staff and it was the closest that any of them could go to. With the John Day pool now out, I mean, Hefner has a pool. There's one in Boardman and there's one in the Dalles. And so anyway, I think a long-term plan is definitely what we need to consider, but it would be nice to know if it's important enough to open it next year with a small sum of money, if we could get the fix to the bottom of the pool. And we don't know how much that would cost right now. We know how much it would cost to reline it, but we don't know how much it would cost to make such a fix. And again, we're fixing property that's not ours.
Yeah.
And we don't want it.
Right. That's my concern is, you know, we're improving property that doesn't belong to us or an entity that doesn't want it. So are we just throwing money at something? And, you know, it would be sad to lose it, but I'm not sure it's in our best interest to continue to.
Yeah. And Tom, you feel strongly about this. Tom's been our champion for the pool, him and Molly.
Well, yeah, I just hate to see we forced to lose it. I really do. That being said, I'm really frustrated with the talks with the school. And I understand what their position is right now. They've got a lot on their plate, but this has been going on for 8-9 years. So I think it's a very important thing. If you asked me, I would say it's a very important thing in our community. I mean, for swimming lessons, for safety for the kids, it gives employment to kids during the summer. I think it's I just think it's very important to have it. But on the other hand, I'm not opposed to us closing it and doing something different, maybe opening a new facility or whatever too. But and just seeing if maybe the rest of the community doesn't agree with me. So I think that is a good question to ask.
So maybe would it be, to sort of address your concern, Sherry, would it be out of line to go back and say to the parties, no, this needs to come through as a competitive grant? And if it's small enough, to Catherine's point, if it's $10,000, that's a special projects grant, basically. It's a 25% match. I mean, and maybe it's just coming back to the parties and trying to figure out how we would come up with that. I mean, is that, rather than just give the money outright, what are you guys thinking on that?
I feel like if we decide that, we're just saying it's going to close.
Because they aren't interested in doing the grant.
Right. So if we specify that you have to apply for a grant, knowing that they're not going to, I mean, we're making that call for the community, which I'd like to hear what the community has to say.
Okay.
I just don't like watching us throw good money after bad. Whereas, if we decided that an entirely new structure outside the school district is a better investment of our money, and ways to make that happen rather than just keep throwing money at something that's, doesn't belong to the city or the county. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering how likely it is that, I mean, who's going to go after like a new pool? Who's interested in doing that?
I think we'd have to have that community discussion and sort of that broader regional discussion about if we were going to do a new pool, what, you know, it may not even be located in Condon potentially. I mean, it could be located someplace else. But that would be a broader community, obviously the long-term. It sounds like, I'm just trying to move us forward to like, okay, what would work for the next step? So it seems like we're on board with this idea that there needs to be a broader community discussion about either a long-term plan for the current pool or closing the current pool and pursuing a new pool, or closing it all together and just saying we're not having a pool. I mean, those are sort of the three options. So that sounds like that is something that maybe we can start moving forward. On the funding question, how would you guys like to tackle that? Do we want to, I'm just throwing out ideas here. Do we want to try to schedule a community meeting about it? Do we want to, would we be willing to fund it outright if the school district met certain conditions? That I could go back to the school district and say, yes, we know long-term you don't want to be part of this, but this one time we will give you the money outright, but X, Y, and Z has to happen? Or how would you like me to approach it?
I'd like to get the community's input.
Okay.
Instead of a small group of us making a decision for the entire community.
Okay.
And so I guess what I'm looking at is who's going to be the driver to get the community together. I mean, obviously, I think, Tom, you can stop me. I think the city of Condon feels that it's somewhat important to have. And so obviously we would like to be a part of it. But if it's going to be a regional pool, we need to have Arlington involved. I think we need to ask Wheeler County if they want to be involved because they use the pool a lot, especially Fossil. Maybe even ask Sherman County. But I think too is, I don't think the decision needs to be made today because I think our council needs to talk about how they want to see it all. So we meet on November 4th. Nothing's happening with the pool right now anyway, other than we can turn all the utilities back to the school since they own it. I mean, if you want to get snarky, and I don't know if we want to get snarky, but what I guess I'm saying is who can I rely on for the county if I say, hey, after I talk to the council, yeah, we want to get a community meeting together. Is there someone that I can coordinate with the county and then we can get to the city, at least to start, to get the other groups involved?
Yeah, I'm definitely here. Depending on when this happens, I may hand it off to Lisa. If we get this going before maternity leave, I'm happy to sort of help shepherd it. And then there might be just that little period where Lisa may need to help keep it going until I'm back in the office. But I think between Lisa and I, we can definitely represent the county and help facilitate getting other partners at the table.
Tom, is this how you see it too? Is the council needs to talk to see which direction they want to go? I think there's some, but we'll find out. Let's get I mean, you have some people on my council that are passionate. You have some that aren't passionate about the pool. I think once the council sits down and talks too, that we'll have a better idea how they want to move forward.
Yeah, I think, we need to wait for that meeting.
Okay. So what I'll plan on doing is I'll plan on attending that meeting. Commissioners, we won't meet again until the 18th of November. So I will plan on, how about what I do is just for now, keep this as a standing update whenever, similar to what we did with like Frontier Telenet, when there's anything to update you on. I'll just bring it back so that you're kept in the loop for now until we have a little bit more direction from the city council on where they want to go. And then we can, Catherine, we can start working on how to facilitate a broader discussion with the community and the region about what to do. And maybe the community feedback is keep it open for the next couple of years while we work out the long range plan kind of thing, or whatever that ends up looking like. And I also wonder, Catherine, if in the interim between now and the 18th, if the council decides that they would like to, they still are, they're going to try to facilitate keeping it open, if maybe we could start exploring how much that might cost, what that alternative, just patch it basically, so that we don't expend a huge amount of money, but enough so that kids aren't hurting themselves next summer.
Right. And with COVID, we don't know what's going to happen next year either.
Yeah.
This year it was kind of touch and go whether we were going to open the pool anyway. But here's my other concern. If we do decide to close the pool, we're never going to be able to reopen it. That is not handicap accessible. I mean, once it closes, it is closed.
Done.
You're not going to get it back. So that also needs to be, people need to be aware of that situation. We're grandfathered in on a lot of little things right now, mainly the ADA stuff. We're not going to be if we close. So, okay, well, I appreciate it. So I'll get some, I'll talk to some pool people if I can round some up and see maybe what we could possibly do to the bottom. And
because that might impact it as well. I mean, if we're talking about a $10,000 fix and that'll keep the pool open for the next 2 years while we get a larger plan in place, that's maybe a different discussion than it's going to cost $150,000, kind of. So it might help to know how much we're talking about needing to come up with.
Well, the preliminary figures to just resurface it was like 30-some thousand, and to put in a 25-year guaranteed liner was closer to 70,000. So hopefully we could get a solution in that, to get it way below that, just to get it going anyway.
Okay.
We'll see if it's possible. Yeah, we'll just look at we'll get a hold of some pool people and see what they're thinking that we might be able to do.
Okay.
Short-term fix.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it sounds like, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, commissioners, just from the tone, it sounds like the preference would be, kind of where my head is going is that we're probably not looking at doing a long-term fix in terms of the maintenance on the pool. That we either need to look at closing it or doing a new regional pool maybe.
That's how I feel, is if we're going to continue, we needed something up to date and something that isn't going to continue to nickel and dime. And if it's not ADA and there's a lot of other things that are wrong with it, then maybe it is time to look at something new.
Yeah, we just had some new equipment put in it, but it's stuff that it's like,
it's transferable.
We needed it. Yeah. Is it transferable? Okay.
Yeah, but some of it is. Yeah.
Okay. So next steps, we'll wait to see what the city council, how that discussion goes in early November. Catherine and I will stay in communication about potential costs for different upgrade or repair options. And then once we kind of get a sense of where the council wants to go, we can start planning to facilitate a larger community and regional discussion about sort of the future of the pool, the current one, and or if we need a new one.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Okay.
Thank you.
Then
Thank you.
that'll be our next step, and I will just plan on continuing to update the court every meeting if there's anything new that's occurred, so that stays on our radar.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Anything
Liz.
more on the pool for today?
Isn't that enough?
No,
I think we covered it, but I just like to check.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, guys. Okay, commissioners, we'll move into 7.0, which is announcements and next meeting. So I have alluded to this a couple of times, but we are canceling the November 4th meeting because we've had some scheduling conflicts come up. And so our next regular meeting will be on November 18th. Again, that's going to be via Zoom. The other thing that I wanted to raise that has come up is our friend Brian Walsh from Avangrid continues to really be pushing for the court to consider a red zone. I understand that came up during your community meeting or your candidates forum last night, and if you've seen your email, there's a letter from the port to that on that issue as well. And so I just wanted to see, Brian has asked for some time with the court. Are you guys okay with me putting him on the 18th to come state his case again on the red zone situation with Montague 2?
Yes, please.
Okay. I will get him scheduled as part of that meeting. Other than that, let me see what else is coming up. The AOC annual conference is going to be held over Zoom, so that's coming up in late November. I'm trying to remember what else we've got.
Yeah, our meeting on the 18th is at 1 o'clock, correct? In order to allow us to attend some of those AOC.
Correct. Thank you for reminding me. Yes. So that morning we'll be at online, the AOC conference. And so we were planning on starting at 1 o'clock. And Michelle does have a planning hearing that we'll need to do. So that I would plan on that being a long meeting to wrap up, do both her planning stuff and our regular business. Let me see. Other than that, I have started meeting with all of our folks that receive operational grants from the county. If you remember, we agreed in this year's agreements that they would be meeting with me a couple of times throughout the year just to check in and see how things are doing. So I did 2 of the meetings earlier this week, and Teresa's got me lined up to meet with the rest of them over the next couple of weeks. So I just wanted to put that on your radar that I am doing that and just kind of checking in, number one, to see how they're faring with COVID and their funding and trying to connect them with any resources that I'm aware of that they may be able to tap into. And then the second piece of that is talking about the long-term prognosis for their financial stability and just kind of brainstorming with them options to make them more financially sustainable long-term. And other than that, I think those are the only real pending meetings that I've got. Lots of baby appointments on the horizon. That's about it for me. What about you guys? What's new in your neck of the woods? Leslie, do you want to go first?
Sure. We had a North Central Public Health District meeting since the last time we met. It was pretty lengthy. We talked about, one of the things we discussed was the possibility of the individual counties either discounting or waiving the fees for next year for some of the small businesses like the inspection fees, or I can't remember what all they were called, but the amount that Gilliam County would have to kick into if we wanted to, provide that to our little local businesses that have been hit hard with COVID was $5,055. So it didn't seem like it was a huge amount of money. And the other thing they talked about was that could come out of our CARES Act funding that we have. And so, we've looked at that a little bit, and it appears that there would possibly be money available in that. And even if there wasn't, it was something that I felt that we could consider as a county court in helping out those businesses. I will have more information. Once I get something in writing from them, I will present that to the court. We also had a community board member that I was able to contact, and basically we were asking her if she was still interested in being on the board. And as I anticipated, she is just very busy. So she was perfectly okay with us putting that out there and seeing if there would be somebody else that's interested that maybe would have more time to attend meetings and be a little bit more involved. So
Okay, we can have Teresa put that out and notice it. And then maybe if we could get names back by the 18th, we can maybe appoint somebody.
okay, but we just talked about, the regular stuff that we've been discussing quite a bit, what our current cases were, and a little bit on rapid testing availability coming up, and just basic stuff. I'm going to be attending the ethics training on Tuesday, and that's what's going on.
Exciting times.
Yeah.
Sherry, what about you? We had a NORCOR meeting last Thursday. It was one of our shorter meetings as we've gotten a lot of things taken care of, and our management team is doing a great job for us. That's the Sherman County Sheriff and Molly Rogers, the juvenile director at the juvenile side of the facility, along with Dan Lindstrom and Jeff. They are doing a great job helping us keep the facility running, and we've had no cases of COVID in the facility. So that's a big kudos to how they're functioning there. And of course, we still remain, our meetings are all virtual to keep us out of the facility, protect our staff and our population. And I have a CAPCO meeting on Friday. And then I will also be attending the ethics training, or participating in the ethics training on Tuesday.
Okay. Awesome. Anything else for the good of the order?
I think that's it.
All right. If not, then our next meeting again is going to be on November 18th at 1 o'clock via Zoom, and it is 12:21, and I will adjourn this meeting.